6:33 p.m. I will call this regular meeting of the Waterbury Select Board to order for Monday, January 25th, 2026. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda. I'll just note that we're using the Zoom meeting ID information that was included on the printed, emailed, and posted agenda. And thank you to Amy Marshall-Carney for helping to flag that. With regards to the agenda, I would note for the Select Board that we had a budget request from Waterbury Area Trails Alliance. I spoke with Alex Showerman, who's the coordinator there, and just talked about funding petitions and process, and that likely there was going to be a request for them to do a funding petition. Alex understood and said, seems like you have a lot going on. Feel free to just take us off the agenda and we'll do a funding petition for a town meeting. So that does not need to be on the agenda, but otherwise I don't have any other changes I'm aware of. Is there a motion on the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda with the 7:40 p.m. slot budget request from Waterbury.
Is there a second? So we had a motion by Kane, second by Mike on the agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda items. This is the minutes of our special select board meeting on December 22nd and our emergency select board meeting on January 2nd. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Kane to approve the consent agenda. Is there any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, consent agenda is approved. Next up is public comment. This is an opportunity to speak to anything that's not one of the items on the warned agenda. We ask that folks keep their comments under 5 minutes, and if you need more time, we're happy to discuss adding you to a future meeting agenda. Is there anyone in the room or online who would like to speak on public comment? Valerie?
I have a question, but I'm not maybe on the agenda. It has to be maybe a bunch of items, so you can ask me to sit down if you'd like to. It has to do with the $350,000 local option tax being recommended to go toward Rainbow Meadow. And we just got $2 million.
That's actually an older version. That's no longer in the proposed budget.
Oh, it's okay. Wasn't it? It's not on anymore?
It's been taken out.
Oh, okay.
It's taken out
All
after
right,
the first.
thank you.
And I'll just note, we can re-review it at 5 too under budget. Any other folks on public comment? Roger?
Yeah, I received, or we received a letter from a resident concerned about the condition of the roads. They have been slippery, the weather has been cold, we've had a lot of snow. And I checked with the Public Works Director, Bill Woodruff, and he did concede that we've been conserving some salt because we've been waiting for a delivery of salt. It was supposed to arrive today. It looks like it's going to arrive tomorrow. But just word to the public that the roads are slippery. They're slippery tonight. I can guarantee you that. And that we all just need to slow down and take that into consideration as they deal with, trying to maintain the road conditions. And I'd like to commend the team that's been out there working the roads. They've been doing a great job, but the weather conditions are such that the roads will be slippery.
Exactly. Anyone else who would like to speak on public comment in the room or online? All right. Seeing none, I'll move to our next item, which is update on town clerk and town treasurer positions. I'm happy to start. For those who subscribe to our select board agendas, you may have seen a flurry of activity on Friday. So I just want to re-review that publicly for public record to reconfirm what's happened and then also provide some additional updates. So the select board received the resignation of Karen Petrovich, who was the elected town clerk and town treasurer. That was effective Friday, January 2nd, 2026. I want to acknowledge that Karen worked both for the then village, then EFUD and town of Waterbury for over 10 years and was a huge asset to the community. So we're very sad to lose her. The process, seeing as those are elected positions, is that the select board is able to appoint folks until the next town meeting. In this case, that is our regular town meeting on the first Tuesday in March. So at that emergency meeting that was held on Friday, emergency because it was warned with less than 24 hours notice, the select board made 2 appointments. For the office of town clerk, we appointed Beth Jones, who's a current assistant town clerk in town to serve. For town treasurer, we appointed Bill Shepela, who is the former municipal manager in Waterbury. So right now, those folks have been appointed by the select board, again, to serve until town meeting. Both town clerk and town treasurer will be on the ballot for town meeting to serve the 1 remaining year out of what was Karen's 3-year term. So normally we elect it every 3 years. Again, it will be on. Candidate petitions, for anyone who would like to run for town clerk and town treasurer are due the same time as select board candidate petitions, which is January 26th. So again, an appointment has been made. Anyone can run for either of those positions. You may have also seen a very official looking vacancy notice. This was following the best practice guidance from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. The select board has the authority to fill the vacancy. Voters could petition to have a special town meeting sooner than town meeting, instead if they are interested. So that's what that notice of vacancy, again, for those of you who are on the town website or at our posting locations, there's one for town clerks and one for town treasurer. But I've received some questions and just wanted to say it's a formality saying we had a vacancy, the select board took action to fill the vacancy. And again, it will be elected at town meeting unless we receive a petition for a town meeting sooner. Did I get all that right? Does anyone have anything to add? Tom?
Just for
Roger?
clarification, we're going to be, those will be 2 separate positions, clerk and treasurer, for anyone interested in running.
Yes, my understanding is they're both elected separately. Historically in Waterbury, one individual has served both, but they are both technically elected separately. It's why we could appoint folks separately. I see Tom nodding. Other questions? Also note that obviously January is a very busy municipal month, particularly in the clerk and treasurer department, particularly with the town meeting notice. So an additional update as of today is that Carol Dawes, who is the retired town clerk and treasurer from Berry City, who has also done consulting in the towns of Orange, Williamstown, and Plainfield, has agreed to serve on a part-time basis as an assistant clerk to help with all of the notification and election process for town meeting. She was appointed by Beth Jones now as our clerk. So those are the updates I have to date on both of those positions. And again, just wanted to be upfront with folks about the sequence of events and next steps. Any questions or comments? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, please come up.
Did we fill the rec department?
Yes, and do you want to just come up? Sorry, and I'm not trying to single you out. It just helps with the Zoom online.
And can I get your name, please, for the minutes?
Owen Duffy.
Hi, Owen.
Hi. I was wondering if we have a rec department, or a rec department, oh my gosh, director, yes.
We do. And she started last week.
She started last Wednesday.
Do you want to say her name? And I'll note we have our recreation department budget on the agenda for tonight. But yeah, we have hired someone and she has started.
Her name is Erica Linsky.
Great.
She started and we're explaining really quickly. So we spent some time actually today going over future plans and getting summer camps up and rolling as fast as we can.
Okay. I'd love to be part of that. Thank you.
Thanks so.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it. Other questions from anyone? All right. We're good? All right. That I will, we're a little ahead of schedule, but we can get right into budget review. First on the list, we have Waterbury Ambulance Service, and Zach Rounds and seeing Chief Rounds is here to present. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. So, again, my name is Zach Rounds. I haven't been before the select board since I took my position at Waterbury Ambulance. I am the chief as of June, so it's a pleasure to meet everybody. Alyssa contacted me looking for some data pertaining to where 2025 landed as far as Waterbury Ambulance is concerned for the community of Waterbury. So I have all of that data. It looked like it was uploaded to the municipal website as well. But some background, Waterbury Ambulance has proposed an 8% increase to per capita rates across our 3 primary service towns, which include Waterbury, Duxbury, and Moortown. So for Waterbury specifically, that would look like a per capita rate that was $38 in fiscal year 25 to a per capita rate of $41.04 in fiscal year 26. So I wanna, if it's okay, if I could just present a little bit of the data.
Please.
So out of 880 incidents that our department answered calls for in 2025, 677 of those were for the community of Waterbury. And I sent some data basically giving a breakdown of what the dispatch reasons were for some of these calls. So for 14% of these calls on average were dispatched as falls. 13% of these calls were dispatched as a sick person, 12% were for motor vehicle traffic incidents, 6.5% for breathing problems, 6% for chest pain non-traumatic, 6% for psychiatric complaints, 3% for abdominal pain, 3% for seizures, 3% for unconscious or fainting, 2.5% for a traumatic injury, 2.5% for no other appropriate choice for dispatches selection, and then 2% were listed as stroke at the time of dispatch. There were several other complaints that were less than 2% each as far as the year in total, and the number 677 reflects 11 calls for our backcountry search and rescue team in the community of Waterbury. So Waterbury, by no question, is our busiest community that we serve. And going forward, we have implemented for fiscal year 26 some pretty intense payroll changes as far as our internal personnel. So for the licensure level of paramedic, we have done a fair amount of research as far as becoming more competitive within EMS services in central Vermont and northern Vermont. After, we've really struggled to maintain that level of staffing due to our wages. Other areas such as Richmond pay their paramedics around $30 an hour, and it really isn't, it's only greater than that other places. So we took the stance that if we would like to maintain a paramedic level of staffing, we need to increase our pay to bring people in the door. So we have added approximately $150,000 to our payroll budget for fiscal year 26 at Waterbury Ambulance, which is going to result in, and actually has already resulted in, paramedics coming in the door and applying for full-time and part-time jobs. So we're already seeing the results of this. That budget reflects, in an ideal world, a paramedic on duty 24/7, 365 days a year. And that budget also reflects a worst case scenario paying a full crew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So something that came with our new building, our new facility, and all of the, the living quarters that came with it was our ability to staff an ambulance in the station 24 hours a day. So we are proud to be Waterbury's only public service entity that has a crew in the building all the time. And we're certainly seeing the use from that. So because of this payroll expense, we have incredible overhead costs as far as the state of readiness. And we are offsetting that with multiple new revenue streams as far as becoming creative. As you may or may not know, EMS really is, they are limited in the way that we can make money. we can't control when somebody calls 911. We cannot control what type of insurance we can bill for. We have to bill all patients equally. And so we are controlling our revenue in ways that we can control. So as far as interfacility transports, we are looking to get an interfacility transfer program off the ground that will better bring in revenue that is more sustainable. And we're looking at how the logistics of that with our current fleet, as well as adding to our fleet with a more fuel efficient ambulance, will impact our bottom line in the future. Additionally, we have created a new partnership with a EMS academy based out of Southern Vermont that will be implementing EMS and public education at Waterbury Ambulance to a multitude of healthcare professionals in Vermont, as well as businesses that are looking for their providers and their staff to become CPR and AED certified. Those courses will be happening at our station, and through this partnership, that will open up a revenue stream for us that, while I can't predict the outcome of the revenue stream, I know that our bottom line will be helped positively from that. And so we do continue to work creatively to build revenue streams and to become independent as an organization financially. That does not mean that we are in a position to not increase our town appropriations across the board by 8% this year. So that is where Waterbury Ambulance stands. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Questions from the board, Roger?
You report that Waterbury and Waterbury Center had 677 calls. That's out of how many overall?
Waterbury Ambulance had 879 documented incidents where the ambulance was needed in some capacity in 2025.
Other questions from board members? Mike?
A brief question, and kind of my habit being, heart attack survivor. I know some of these other things can be partially due to, someone. I'm surprised there was not like a number. I'm sure people have had heart attacks within.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So the data that I presented as far as categorizing emergency calls, this is how the incident was dispatched by Montpelier. So when they get the 911 call, they have to select something. Very often when we get dispatched to something, we roll up and find something different. So it's very common for the dispatch reason to actually differ from what we find when we get to the patient. The list was not, I could not summarize those statistics in the amount of time that I had. So I went with the dispatch reason.
And another quick question. Right. After your name, you have BS. What does that stand for?
Bachelor's of Science.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking of something more medical.
No, it's not. It could mean whatever you want it to.
And to the point on data, I just want to notice and appreciate that it sounds like you and Tom have already talked about kind of more regular updates. We get monthly updates from the state police, but that moving forward, that can be a practice for you as well.
For sure.
Tom, I'm sorry to make you do logistics. I will say I'm currently on the 12/7/25 draft budget, which is what has our overall public safety, unless someone can find it sooner. I know we have roll-ups today.
So it's on the website.
Thank you.
There's an Excel
Perfect.
file. And there's a public safety tab
Incredible.
that reflects the 8% change.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see. This is great. Thank you. I just wanted to say for kind of both the board and candor for you, Zach, around like, we totally recognize, I'll say speaking for myself, that there's been a variety of changes. And again, in the 4 years I've served on the board, it's gotten from, 54 to 215. And so that's a huge change for this community. And I think that's kind of just what we're here to discuss, of recognizing you all are doing a great job trying to diversify revenues, I'm hearing, and that the building is exciting. And I know did a ton of fundraising for that, but just to be candid about, that's kind of what we're weighing, and it's been over a pretty short increase. So again, we have the 8% in the budget as you proposed, but to be transparent to you, to the community, to the select board, like that's been, it's been a very rapid increase in a short amount of time.
Absolutely.
Do other board members have questions? Any members of the public have questions? Chris?
I'm just curious, any projections on future increases, potential increases, looking further out? I mean, I know it's probably hard to figure with healthcare costs just being all over the place.
Are you talking about financial increases, or are you talking about increases in our volume?
Well, no, increases to financial increases to the.
So, yeah, it's a good question. I have not been here long enough to really get my hands on what the needs are. I just finished my first budget for the department, and, you know, with what I presented to you and some of the forecasted revenue increases, I'm proposing a balanced budget to the trustees at Waterbury Ambulance in 2 weeks. That being said, you know, we still pay our EMTs $17 an hour and our AEMTs $18 an hour, and I do not have any money to play with to increase their wages right now. So I would say that I'm hopeful that new programs will offset any additional needs, and that any future changes could become, you know, cost of living type situations, but I hesitate to commit.
Thank you. Tom?
If I may, I can give a little bit.
And Tom, can you just speak up for the recording, only because I get emails about the recording?
So I can give a little bit of history as I understand it. I've looked at older ambulance service budgets, and prior to COVID, my recollection is the ambulance service was not on great financial footing. And COVID was a financial windfall. There were a lot of grants that came through and a lot of new programs, organizations, things like that. I think had COVID not occurred, some of these increases would have occurred during that time frame. So I think that's part of, there was some catch up here that had to happen. I've also done a fair amount of research about what other municipalities pay for ambulance service, and it's so varied, there's no such thing as a meaningful average. There are towns not far from here, there are valley towns that pay nothing. It's strictly a volunteer service. I think that is reflected in their response times too, but it's free. In Waterbury, it breaks down to about $40 per person. Of course, it's part of your tax rate, but per capita, I think is a useful way to think about it. If I look at towns of our size that have municipal ambulance service, quadruple it, you multiply it times 5, and we're probably in the range of what it would cost if we ran it. So we certainly don't want to do that. So I just wanted to get that as context. And if I may have a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
First question, building project fully done, paid for.
Correct.
Okay, so that's not driving this budget at all.
Yeah, that's correct.
Second question, can you describe on average, someone needs an ambulance on private insurance, what do you bill the insurance versus what does someone pay if they join your prescription program? Or, sorry, subscription program.
So when we, and forgive me, I do not have our billing rates memorized.
Roughly, what is it?
Yeah. So there is a variance in how patients are billed depending on the demand of what is going on. So for a basic life support emergency call, which I think would be the most common occurrence, we bill a base rate of $1,200 for the call, and then we bill $32 per ground mile to get to the hospital. The only mileage that we bill is from the patient's residence or wherever they're located to the hospital. That's called the loaded mileage. So we bill that, and that bill is much higher than we're often reimbursed. The most common patient that is in this catchment area is a Medicaid patient. So we will receive 80% of that, and, you know, the patient is responsible for 20% out of pocket. And that comes 3 months after the call. If you join our subscription program, then your insurance pays the 80% that they're due to pay, and the 20% or the deductible that the patient would be out of pocket would be written off. And the ambulance service, in our case, us, we take care of that out of the pool of the subscription funds. So it is really a meaningful service for people that are on Medicaid, Medicare, or really anybody that has a deductible that foresees or doesn't foresee, you know, having an emergency or having a need for an ambulance. It saves a lot of money for the patient. And I believe that it caps at 3 transports per year. So, you know, that for most people is fine. But it is a much more economical way for most patients.
Listen, can I clarify my question perhaps?
Is it just on the per capita, Chris? Your question is
Yeah.
around the, if you,
Well, my question was, do you see any, you know, with healthcare being just going through the roof, healthcare expenses, just getting started as an ambulance service in your new location and everything, do you see anything coming down the road that's gonna be, affect you adversely and cause you to have, you know, some bigger financial issues? I'm happy to pay it $40, that's not, I'm
Yeah.
happy that the service is here.
Mhm.
I just wanted to know if you saw anything coming down the road that might affect the way you operate and make it more difficult for you to stay within your guidelines, you know, your budget guidelines.
Nothing dramatic as is today is going to change anything substantially. However, you know, like nationwide, the politics on Medicare, Medicaid funding and all of that, like that impacts us. Because it's 70% of our patients that we encounter have the federal insurance. So when big changes down the line negatively impact patients' ability to have health insurance, that impacts us. Because majority of the time, you know, the reality is for EMS nationwide, patients that have this out-of-pocket burden don't often pay it. And so then we don't have a way to make up that money. So today, we're good, but if 20% of Waterbury were to lose their health insurance, we would have a problem. So, and a lot more people would have.
That's what I'm
But, yeah.
any other questions from the board? Tom, anyone online? Oh, Valerie, sorry.
You mentioned paramedics and the $17 an hour. So I know paramedics are usually, they're more necessary in the rural areas. We're so close to DDMC and CDMC. So I'm wondering how many paramedics do we actually have in that?
So
Versus
we're,
an I would be.
well, I would actually challenge you a little bit in our proximity to the hospital and what defines rural. Our being, you know, at minimum 15 minutes to CDMC does create a lengthy transport time compared to most of the EMS services. It's more common in Vermont, but most EMS services are very short transport times. And then it's 28 to 32 minutes depending on traffic to DDM, which creates a long buffer for us to need to provide patient care on the way to the hospital. So how many paramedics do we have in Waterbury? We have, as of tomorrow, we have 2 credentialed full-time paramedics in Waterbury working for Waterbury Ambulance. We have a handful of other paramedics that are working on an onboarding process that's determined by the district, which is a lot of central Vermont. And so that process, when you're brand new, takes a lot of time, especially with our call volume being so low. So we have a few paramedics that are working on that process, but are not able to operate at that level until the process is complete, or until it's complete.
I started out in paramedics and sometimes want to do a lot of work in the ambulance and not waste time getting to the hospital.
Sure, yeah, no, I think it's all about perspective, you know, like a paramedic has the licensure level to make the determination to stay on the scene and treat. Whereas, you know, provider with less of a licensure level has less tools in their toolbox to use before they get the patient out of there, you know? I mean, we have narcotics, we have a lot of different tools that paramedics need in order to make a patient more comfortable when they have a broken leg, or, you know, like if they are having a heart attack, actually, or they're having symptoms of a heart attack, actually diagnosing that patient and taking a couple extra minutes to make sure you go down the right clinical path can make a patient's, you know, end result significantly better, especially when you do have these transport times to Berlin, which, you know, from most of our scenes is taking us at least 20 minutes to get. Not so much in downtown Waterbury, but, you know, like a lot of our calls out in Waterbury Center, you know, it takes us a while to get them packaged. We don't have a first response agency in Waterbury, actually in any of the communities that we're primary for. So when there's an emergency that we're dispatched on, it is just your ambulance crew that is getting there. They're doing all of the first care, they're doing the initial care, they're doing the packaging and the transport, which in my experience is much different than what
I
I'm
did
used
for
to.
10 years, it's great.
Yeah,
I appreciate you very much.
absolutely. Thanks for the question.
Can you explain the difference between an EMT and a paramedic? What is that?
Oh, yes, there is. So an EMT is an entry-level position. You go to a course, it varies in length of time, and you come out of it with a certification that allows you to do CPR, take vital signs, administer oxygen, put a cervical collar on a patient, and do very basic. It's an EMT basic, you know, by definition for a reason. So it's the lowest clinical level on an ambulance that can provide care. And then the next level is the level that I am, which is an advanced emergency medical technician. This provider can do more advanced level diagnostics and really, like, with a more fine-tooth comb, figure out, is this sick or not sick? What road should we start going down? They can give and do more procedures, medications, and so on. And it's the most common advanced life support level in Vermont by far. And then a paramedic is really, most people call them like the doctor of the ambulance. So they are not physicians, but they are able to do a intubation, which is putting a tube in somebody's throat in the event of, you know, respiratory arrest. In the event of a cardiac arrest, they can give, you know, just about every medication that the emergency room is going to give. They can do, you know, a lot more higher level procedures, and, you know, in rural areas where help is, getting to a patient is longer, and getting to a hospital is longer, the paramedic is, you know, very valuable. We also, I don't have the statistics available, but just from riding on the ambulance in Waterbury, I can say that where I come from, the need for a paramedic is not on every call. And here, while it's not on every call, there are very routinely instances where a paramedic being on the truck has been valuable, which is why I'm continuing to go down the staffing road for a paramedic, because I'm seeing it, you know, this community and others need more paramedics in the system. So I'm hopeful that our changes are resulting in an increase in staffing, and I think that this increase in staffing is going to be put to use.
Any other questions or comments from folks on the board for Zach?
I also realized I did have something that I should have said in public comment pertaining to ambulance. Is it okay if I?
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
So I just wanted to mention that in 2026, Waterbury Ambulance is also making some strategic changes to become more modern as far as EMS as a whole. And one of the things that we're looking at right now, and a change that I have implemented as of January 1st, is a change to the way that we use lights and sirens. So I just want to make public the indication for lights and sirens, what our crews have been instructed to do by me, and sort of what my criteria is based on. So I've instructed our crews to reduce licensed sirens usage to life-threatening emergencies and for more routine type chronic calls to reduce to a flow of traffic response, which is in line with national guidance as well as Vermont EMS guidance to reduce licensed lights and sirens usage across the board due to its increase in traffic incidents for the community as we are making our way through town, you know, especially when it's very busy around Waterbury. It increases in some cases by over 50% using lights and sirens, the risk of a traffic incident involving an ambulance. So we will still be using lights and sirens. It does not mean that we are taking the call any less seriously. Our crews are under very strict guidance as far as getting out the door once dispatch has notified them of an emergency call. And those the timelines have not changed. So they still need to be out the door within 2 minutes during the day shift once they've been notified, regardless of how they're going to get to the call. But if it is for a fall without injury, they are going to go to that scene without lights and sirens to keep everybody safe. If there is a call for chest pain, they're going to go lights and sirens. If there's a call for a motor vehicle accident, they're going to go lights and sirens. You know, we're not gonna put patients in a worse position, but 9 times, you know, this is not an actual statistic, but more often than not, right? Like we are pushing traffic with lights and sirens to get to a call, and this patient is stable. So that's just something I wanted to make public for anybody. And if they have any questions about that, anybody can come to the station at any time and talk to me about it.
Any other questions for Zach? I just want to thank you again, particularly given the limited notice time for putting this all together and being here. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. Great. Any other questions or discussion from the board, or are we good to move on? Hearing none. Next up, we have Natural Disaster Preparedness Committee.
That's your inventory request up in the screen.
Just a touch. And for folks in the room, there's printed copies in the packet, and it's also posted online.
That's a little bit.
So, what we have are 2 separate budgets. One is purchase recommendations for a one-time inventory budget. That was, the list was created by the Natural Disaster Preparedness Committee. The original committee created a draft list in the manual, and then over the past few months, we've refined it with the committee and in talks with crew and past volunteers and with some research. And basically, we could do one of 2 things. We could go ahead and knock out all of the inventory purchases in 2026 so that volunteers can spend time fully organizing, prepping. The goal being that we will store all flood response inventory in the Armory on High Street, which we've got some space for now, as well as with the purchase of a trailer, like to-go ready inventory inside that trailer, so that a team lead on the inventory team, someone with a truck, when it's response time, can go up, hitch the trailer, bring it to here or wherever the response site is, fully ready to respond. And then we can pick up additional stuff as needed. We could just break this down and get some things this year. It's hard to pick order of priority, but if you said, you know, 11,000 is too much this year, let's cut it in half. And I think that, you know, the committee and I could work on doing that. The biggest purchase is that trailer. It's something that's been talked about over the past year since the last flood. Other than that, it's nothing that's above $1,000 really for each thing. So that's sort of the overview. I'm happy to talk more or answer questions.
questions or comments from board? And also, will you just say who you are and what
I'm
hat
so
you're wearing?
sorry.
No worries.
Yes, I'm Dana Kelman and wearing the hat of, what's the title? Natural Disaster Preparedness Coordinator. Yeah, we did it.
Awesome.
Yeah. I guess it is important to note that there are two budgets we're presenting today so that you don't have to look at this in a vacuum. The other budget is a little bit more complicated conversation, but would more than double the total ask for the 2026 budget.
I'm curious, do you want to just run through that? So we
Yeah,
have both and I can talk more?
So the other, I think we're looking for a little bit more input from the select board in terms of how much we want to initially invest. But the second budget is the response budget. So this is critical things like dumpsters, the Vector trucks, dehumidifiers, overtime for public works, a coordinator to run the response, and then ongoing training and community events, which is a small piece of this budget. This is something that we hope we won't need to use for a long time. The goal being that we have a budget that can then be saved and ready for when a response is needed to be mounted. The proposal that we come to you with is fully funding this so that it's there, and whether it's a savings account or whatever the town deems appropriate, then potentially each year we fund an additional 15% or something similar. We know the cost will rise year over year, but hopefully that means that when an event occurs, we're not then going over budget, scrambling for funds or concerned, but it's here and we're ready to move and respond. Of note, in the past, we borrowed Vector trucks from neighboring towns that Tom has had personal relationships with. They have said that they're willing and able to do that again. But we know that things change. Those towns might get flooded and need them. If relationships aren't there anymore, or people leave from other towns that we don't know who's there. There's a million things that could come up. So another piece of the puzzle of having to continue to build this fund is that if we need to rent them and then it's an $8,000 cost, that's not a shock, right? So we don't want to just fund this one time and then forget it. We want to build on it a little bit. We also don't want to deplete it. And then knowing that if there's a response, there'll be some inventory replenishment needed. We won't, shovels aren't consumables, but the Tyvek suits and cleaning kits might be. So I think that's the big picture.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do board members have questions? Roger, we'll go around the circle. Roger came next.
Just wondering, do either of these contain the stipend to retain your position? Or is that in a different budget?
They don't. That was in the staff. Yeah.
Okay.
But what is in here is there's an hourly position. Maybe I'm on vacation when there's a flood, or I have COVID, like what happened in December 24. So being able to pay someone to work that incredible amount of hours and be available, I think is really important to have in there. So that's why we put that hourly piece in there.
I have some questions, Danny, about Vector truck on page 2 specifically. That's, to me, I interpret this as considering that no one else has thought of this first should disaster strike. River doesn't have any funds to spare. Is there any way with that company to like have them on retainer?
I don't know. We talked about doing something like that with other towns, like a sort of consortium. There was too much hesitancy. So I don't know, but we could research that. I don't know what that would look like or what that cost, and if it would be cost effective or not. And I also don't know what their inventory is, you know what I mean? Like some towns have them, so, but we could do some more research on that.
My second question was air tags.
Yeah, dehumidifiers. I guess that's, so our biggest stressor in every single flood was the dehumidifiers going missing. We did charts on the wall, as you know, we did spreadsheets, we did phone signups, and we were door to door. Please give us back the dehumidifiers that we're renting by the week. So I forget whose brilliant idea it was. It was not mine, so I don't want to take the credit. Air tags, it is a small investment. And I think would save a massive amount of headache and hours.
Mike?
Just going back to, the Vector trucks.
Mhm.
What's the difference in the cost here versus, I know where we've lent them from other municipalities,
They did not charge us.
so there was no cost involved, so this is a full difference.
Full difference, yeah.
Is it possible, I don't know, I'll ask Tom or Danny, is there a possibility to enter into some sort of
We
an
tried,
MOU?
but they were not interested. Yeah. Yeah, I know, it's a great idea. Unfortunately, it was not one that other towns were
Because
comfortable with.
they made it themselves.
They were worried and just, yeah, not comfortable with it. But, they did say that call them, if they're not using it, if it's not broken down, they want to still help out. So we just hope those relationships stay.
Great, thanks.
Other questions and comments? I'll just say, I really appreciate the two-part approach to this budget, and I think we do need to recognize that these things are happening more. I think there is still some important, to your point, select board guidance around how much of this is a municipal expense and how much we budget for and all of those things, but I think I just appreciate the approach of saying, instead of 2 years after the fact, having needed to figure it out, that we proactively put some placeholder money in for the rainy day, for when things happen. So I appreciate that approach. I think we've had that conversation in other places in the budget too. So I'm also just curious how we make this coherent and clear for the community. Again, to Roger's point, Danny's position, we have expenses on, this including like municipal staff and other separate things, and just, it's not a feedback for you. I'm just thinking about how we're clear with the community about kind of this bucket of work and how we're funding it and saving it if we don't use it and the like. Roger?
The town is preparing, or maybe submitted today, a community development block grant, which doesn't start until 2027.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, are there any expenses here that could fit into that funding or other funding sources?
Some, yes, a little bit of inventory, not a lot. The grant I helped with Dana with writing it, is for education and outreach specifically. So the trainings that you'll see on the response budget, it's this very small line item, it's like $750, although we asked for significantly more. What we didn't want to do is burden the taxpayers, but if that grant is received, we'll not only be able to host the trainings, we'll be able to advertise them, coordinate with other towns, and video and edit them and have them posted on YouTube and on our website. So kind of beefing up everything that's here. It would also, it would do not much of a dent, but some of a dent in some of this. And then, it's for 2027. But we can't buy all the inventory for response. So the inventory that we purchase has to be used for training. So we do buy like 4 of each things, it needs to be for education and outreach.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that we have been working on this project now, all its parts and tentacles, for 2 straight years. Actually, we're almost at 3. Right?
Yeah.
6 months. And the way I'm reading most of this is to supplies that the response team is going to need in the event of a flood. And so I don't think this is one subject that we look to cut corners on or we skimp on, especially with looking at the weather over the next week.
It's fine. It's gonna rain on Friday, but it's not gonna be that bad. It's a ½ inch and then it's gonna get cold again. We're good.
It's a more friendly prediction.
Yep.
I think this is one of the things that we as a select board need to lean head first into and fund completely, because who knows what's going on with FEMA at the federal level. We're going to pay for this stuff anyway when it floods. Might as well do it now before we have to run to Home Depot and try and get out of 3 feet of water on Route 2 to get there.
Other board member questions? Mike, and then I see Amy online and in the room.
is there any way that we could have some sort of program where we could help subsidize homeowners in flood-prone areas to buy dehumidifiers? Dehumidifiers, you
Yeah.
can do it a lot cheaper than renting them is very expensive.
Yeah, it is on the list as part of the education and outreach. So there might be a world in which we don't get as many each time, but people move, people come and go, things break, so in a perfect world, if everyone in the flood zone bought one today, they may not have it in 3 years or 5 years or whatever. So to just plan ahead, is probably the best course of action. But yeah, but to your point, yes, that is one of our goals for communication and outreach.
Just rental equipment is very expensive versus buying something. So you go down to Harbor Freight and buy these commercial dehumidifiers. Pretty cheap.
Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to commend the team for looking at a very proactive approach. I think it makes sense. I have a more kind of nitpicky question around the trailer. One, if it's mobile, do we think we can get it where it needs to be if there's water in town? It's more of a practical question. But two, are you also looking at perhaps a used model that would be a little less expensive, but yet still meet your needs, particularly because it's not something that would be used frequently, hopefully. Therefore, it wouldn't need to have the longevity of the newness. Other than that,
Yeah, it'll come from High Street to probably the steel room, so should be okay if pulled by a truck. And the also hope of having everything at the ready is that it can be here before the floodwater is to where a car might be.
Yep.
So that's the goal of planning ahead. Absolutely, the goal is something used. We picked an MSRP, is that the right word? We picked the purchase rate for something new just in terms of not to exceed type. But if the select board, based on some of this feedback, wants to say our not to exceed should be 5,000, that's fine with me. I didn't do the research, trailers are not my specialty. So I think that it was Mike from Crew who gave this quote as like a cap or something. So, but yes, that's definitely the goal. I'm happy to adjust if that someone knows better about what trailers of that size might cost.
What is the size of it?
Great question. I knew that was gonna come and I don't have it in front of me, but I can get back to you. But the goal will be that there'll be hooks and shelves inside the trailer, shovels, pretty much things ready to roll in bins, etc.
and there may be providers that would be willing to work with you on discounted rates based at cost. So thank you.
Peter was next and then Valerie.
So thanks. I don't know a lot about this. Is there any other natural disasters you prepare for, or this is just?
Not yet, but that's the goal.
That's the eventual goal.
It's the imminent need that we know that continues to happen and will continue as a flood. And I think we talked about, the goal was natural disasters on a whole, but to bite off way more than we can chew was not the best choice.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. So I borrowed a lot of these things from Crew. Are you part of Crew?
No, really good question. If you don't mind, like a minute for everybody. Yeah. So we've talked about this at a few other meetings, but budget is a great time because more people are here. So the Crew is trying to become the long-term recovery group. So that means they are not the immediate response group. We're going to help with things that could take a long time, from insurance to FEMA to rebuilding to repairing, a lot of case-by-case long-term things. What the NDPC is immediate response. So from the moment we think a flood is coming to getting out the muck, to emptying basements, to the dumpsters, ideally a week, but we know it's depending. So immediate response for NDPC and then Crew. But because we weren't established in the last flood, Crew they were established and they took over because there wasn't, anyone else really to do it.
So Crew gives out things, but you're gonna actually go.
So the stuff that's in our inventory mostly belongs to the towns. Some of it belongs to Crew.
Okay.
Crew was just running a response, so they won't own most of the inventory. The town will.
Okay.
There's some things like drywall repair.
The immediate stuff has been great.
Yeah.
Like I've borrowed everything.
Yeah.
Here almost. But what I say is some of these things, if you ask for it, like a hammer, I mean, I've got 3 hammers. I mean, I think you don't have to spend money maybe on some of these things, like from Portorum or the town. Do you have an extra, I mean, you don't need new, because it's not gonna look new as soon as you use it.
Yeah, so
I'm
it's,
just saying.
yeah, I think it depends if there are, you know, if it's whatever, if we wanna take out $500 for the budget and that is important enough, then we can have volunteers do posts and start collecting things. It's not a problem to do that. The organization of presenting a budget, being ready to know what we had and then shopping was the timeline, versus scattershot, like over the last couple of months, like collecting things. So I think that it's very, if we wanna say, okay, don't take out hammers and shovels and broom, you know, these are all things.
I'm not asking you to take it out, just saying, I bet you the community
Oh,
would offer up,
Sure.
because you helped us so much. that
Oh,
we would-
absolutely.
I mean, I've got like 5 hammers.
Yeah, and that could
I
definitely
could
be
find
fun.
that 2 of them today. but
Yeah.
I know I have.
It's a chicken and the egg thing. Next meeting.
That's what I thought. Where's my hammer?
Several hammers. Select-
Yeah, no, not the world of you.
One object to the select board meeting.
And then my last one is the buckets from the American Red Cross. I have one and I wanted to bring it here and I was told throw it away. It's got like a mop in it and baking soda and the spray bottle, so
We can,
like, don't you want them back?
we have,
or-
when we move it, right now, they're all, everything's in the basement and there's not
Okay,
room for things. I mean, we could take it and put it there, but the goal is to move it in an organized fashion, to inventory it, to label it, and we'll happily.
yeah,
put
I
it
just
with
didn't want
those,
to throw it all away.
Yeah, you're good.
Do it, or give it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the board or folks online?
Just one comment. This, I think, echoes what Kane said, but if you want to fund the response part of it, it sounds like you're almost leaning towards something on the warning that says special reserve fund. So once it's approved by the voters, it's there in perpetuity unless the voters say otherwise.
The full line, the full,
Whatever amount the voters determine, but
yeah,
not operating, not the national disaster preparedness person's pay.
right.
Not some of the
But
supplies,
response.
but the response, which is not a guarantee, but this way, if the voters approve it, those funds are a guarantee.
Yes.
And then the other piece for people to bear in mind about the response is much of your response expenses, provided there's traditional FEMA reimbursement, comes back to you.
Mhm. Right.
So 10 or 15 grand might really get backfilled at least half of it.
Yeah, and I think funding the response, and I can't tell if this is what you're talking about, but I wouldn't put the same amount in every year.
Right.
Okay, got that. And then, yeah, if you were to fund response and not inventory, I think we could start with, as Val suggested, what can we get for donations? Beef up the inventory we have, hope there's not a flood. And then next year, use some of that reserve to bulk up inventory, but we wouldn't want to deplete the response fund, you know, that kind of thing. So,
I'm not suggesting don't fund one or the other. I'm just that if you wanted the lockbox.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
understood. Kane, did you?
Yeah, that wasn't really what I was talking about, Tom. What I was talking about was, I mean, the reserve fund sounds great. I'll just get on board with anything, reserve funds for stuff. I will have money later. But what I'm talking about is, I don't think if floods especially, and this town's collective trauma around flooding, and we have to spend ungodly sums of money when floods happen to procure all these things on the fly in the moment. I just think we need to buy it ahead of time. Donations are great, Valerie. If you want to donate all your hammers, I'm on board. But I do think we need to acquire all these things, whether it's we're spending the money on it or people are donating it in a timely fashion before we get into flood season.
If I may, though, I think the last thing is we do have a couple of committee members here, and what we talked about is really what Kate said. We've talked about it in multiple meetings. It's going to happen. It might happen next year. It might happen in 7 years. We're gonna spend the money, as Kate is saying. Things will get more expensive. Things might be harder. The town might have had a harder year. We don't know what to predict.
And having the money there, I think, is gonna be an easier pill to swallow and one less thing for everyone to worry about when there's a natural disaster. So what we talked about as a committee is let's ease some of that future crisis burden by being prepared. And that, you know, the name of our committee is preparedness. So we take it seriously.
You folks want to come up because you came all the way here and you go to regular meetings every month and might just want to say hello?
Hello,
Hello.
John Mulder. I guess I'm sort of the chairman of the committee.
I'm Betty Ricky, a member.
And the one thing I want to say is that whatever we put together here as far as the equipment for storing, for responding to events ahead of time will give us the opportunity to train with that material. And that's really the key to being successful, so that we don't have our hammers for the first time and never having banged on something. So it is important to plan ahead as much as we can in the moment. And the training component is such an important part of making this all come together. Getting all the equipment together is going to be very, very helpful for us.
I hope it's appropriate, but I do want to say I am so grateful to the town for hiring Danny. I mean, she has made a tremendous difference in how much we've been doing and actually accomplishing. So thank you. Really terrific.
Awesome. Other questions or comments from the board, Roger?
I know that thanks to Kane, the committee came together 2.5 years ago and put together the manual. What changes has the committee taken on since Danny came on to direct? How has that changed what you do in community meetings? That sort of
It's primarily, we're establishing goals now for where we're going for the future. We're getting all the training schedule. We established an ongoing schedule of training for people. We send out requests for volunteers to come into this whole training program. And it's really going to be an ongoing process.
The other note is that the manual has been updated quite a bit. And the other piece of the process that I spent a lot of time on because it felt really important initially was the intake, like assessment and evaluation. So we've streamlined the intake and evaluation form for affected houses. And then are working on making it compatible with Crew's database so that we can take our information house by house and then pass it on to Crew for their long-term work. So if a house is done, great, we check them off. But once the initial response is done, it's a seamless transition between on-the-ground response to long-term recovery with Crew.
And how many actual on-the-ground volunteers do you have on the
I think we've only got about 30 folks on the email list of we want to be a part of the core. And that was from just a couple of outreach and one meeting this summer. But then next month will be our first muck out on the ground training. So we're hoping to have a good amount of that.
This will not be a real look at.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But those folks, these folks
Looking
are.
for real mud maybe. Be
You can shovel
obliged.
snow. But these folks are people who will consider leaders and they are checking that box when they sign up of, we can put out an all call when there's a disaster. And as we've seen over and over, Waterbury is going to respond. They show up en masse. But what's really important is that we have a couple dozen people who are really confident and know what their jobs are. So it's okay if 10 people show up and they don't know what they're doing. They can be in a group with someone who's been to a couple trainings and take them out. And so that's our big focus is get people confident and knowing what to do.
I don't want to chase us, but how much of you you guys are focused mainly on flooding and stuff like that. But other kind of disasters, looking at a year ago, the fires out in, out in the West Coast, I know we don't probably get serious earthquakes, we get very minor earthquakes. But there are a bunch of different kind of like hazardous waste spills, et cetera. How much are you doing those other kind of?
As someone else asked earlier, our goal eventually is as many natural disasters we can be prepared for as possible. This is what we consider imminent, as in it's happened multiple times, and it takes a long time to get ready. So it is one of the long-term goals. It's not a 2026 goal.
I think, Mike, to just be better, it's awareness. Awareness on the part of this people that we need, volunteers, what they need to do to be properly prepared and trained to respond, no matter what, and what they should know not to do, as important as what to do.
Even if it's not specific, the more volunteers are aware and trust each other and the community's coming together, it's easy to call on people, even if we don't have an exact handbook.
Some of the gear too, like the high duct suit would be helpful. Shovels are great, you know, if it's a fire.
Other questions or comments? Taking off my hat as chair and just Alyssa as one member of the select board, if I was just a member of the select board, I feel like something like a $10,000 purchase budget, which is pretty close to your full request, but allows for some flexibility and prioritization and stockpiling of local hammers is something I would support putting in the budget. And I do appreciate the point around if we're creating a flood reserve, that we should do it via a public question so there is clarity. And I think these costs as outlined could be included in that. I wonder if there's other costs that we have elsewhere in the budget that should go in it, but I would say I also support if we're doing a natural disaster reserve fund, not just flood, doing that as a separate one question. So those are my personal individual thoughts, and just thanks to you all. Any other questions or comments?
I suggest that we don't forward a rainy
A special dry, sunny in the sky day. Not really like rainy day fun. Does anyone else have questions or comments on this before we move forward? Again, we're going to look at the whole budget so we can talk about how this fits in.
Just one quick comment.
Yeah.
We've been talking about hammers a lot.
For the rainy day.
Yeah, just to portion that. But when you go to purchase a hammer, I'll just tell you one thing, is a lifetime of using them. Don't buy the ones with a real sharp bend on the claws. Buy the ones that are slightly bent and way more functional.
Okay, before we purchase, we'll email you. Or we'll be rejecting donations. So. Sorry, not gonna.
Incredible. All right, anything else on this?
I have a question of process. So
yes.
When, if there needs to be a public question or something like that, will we know what we need to do? Is there more that we all need to do?
Such a great question. I'll let Tom correct me on the specifics, but my understanding is that we're going to present a full budget to voters. We have already said that we're going to take out the local option tax stuff, and that will be separate on the warning from the whole rest of the budget. My understanding is there is special reserve funds in Vermont, so it's part of your whole thing, but Waterbury has a conservation reserve fund, which means voters at a town meeting in the past, I think like 2007, said, we want to put money in this fund and it's going to stay in this fund for this purpose forever. And we've had conversations as the select board has been doing projects about this money that rolls over. So I think Tom is saying, if we want to have a not rainy day, but disaster day fund, that if we didn't spend it each year, it didn't just go into the general fund, we would need to specify the creation of that as its own piece of the warning. Did I do a layperson okay? What should we add?
Okay, great.
But in terms of what the group would need to do, I think it would mostly be for us as we're crafting the warning, which will be by the end of this month. Just to have that. Yeah, specifically, and we would get a legal opinion on. I think you might have to create it and then fund it separately. So we might have to actually take the money out to say create the fund and then put the money into the fund. That would be a lawyer question.
Okay, great.
But yeah, I don't think there's anything specific. I think it's an ask process question with the warning. Is there other questions or comments from folks? Anyone online? Alrighty,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
thanks to you and to the committee for your work. All right. With our newfound budget time, we will move right along to the Recreation Department budget, which we haven't reviewed yet. And Tom, I will turn it over to you. And maybe if we could throw that up in just a moment. Thank you.
I did specifically say to the new rec director that it's not even your first week. Please don't stay for a late night meeting. We've gone over the budget in some detail and we'll keep doing that. I didn't want to orient her with a almost 8 o'clock meeting during the first week stuff. Let me start with the pool. And I believe that, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but 2027 is still the planned year that the reservoir is drawn down. So that should be a different budget for the pool for that year. I would assume there's going to be some more public use if the reservoir is not there.
Like fish in the pool.
The pool revenue and expenses are really, I think, the most straightforward part of the rec department budget. The pool averages a net operating cost of between $50,000 and $60,000 historically, and the budget really reflects that. On the staffing side, which is line 11, we did give an above inflationary increase in regular pay, and that's really to just give us some more hours on the staff side. Just to give people some understanding of what we've done at the pool historically. We've tried a lot to balance the number of lifeguards we have on staff versus actual public usage. In general, we don't get a lot of public use of our pool outside of the day camp. So we try to look hard at staffing and we've looked hard at things like nights and weekends and when we're open and just decided that you can't have, 3 lifeguards on all day for a Saturday when you have a handful of people there. And we've tried to advertise differently and capture different audiences, but it just doesn't get a whole lot of public use outside of day camp. So we're going to keep trying new ideas. But that's been the history, so it's unlikely that we're going to find 50 grand in the couch cushion square. The big thing I'd like to try to stress, where I think there is some value that we could add, is trying to focus a bit more on things like birthday parties. If you can get 3 lifeguards scheduled for a couple of hours and have a birthday party at the pool as a private party, on hours they don't come to operate, there's certainly a profit margin there. The question is, can we have the lifeguards be available? But I think in general, your pool is gonna cost you something in this range as long as you have a pool. And I think that's the public question that you need to ask yourself: is there some point at which, if that net operating cost goes up, you think it's a little bit unbearable, or we should work harder to find a way to reduce it? What I will say is that in conversations with the rec committee, they feel really strongly about the pool, in particular about teaching kids to swim, which is a big part of what we do, where we get most of the revenue for the pool. They don't want to be part of a community that offers swim lessons. So I think that's pretty valuable guidance. We've tried to carry forth with that. Moving down to the real action is line 36 on this screen, and let me scroll down, which is program revenues. So this is the big summer camp. So historically, the rec department has set the rates for summer camp. There is a legal differential that we can only charge non-residents so much as compared to residents. The budget number of 140,000, I think is very achievable, and I'll get down further and tie that to staffing. You'll see some actuals in the prior years that are quite a bit higher when we had very little limits on the number of kids we took, but we've become more concerned about both quality and safety. So we've tried to cap the number of kids to make sure that we're just providing the level of care that we really feel like we need to. And that's the big part about program revenues. So I think, if anything, I think that $140,000 is quite conservative. I don't want to overstate it, but I do think it is conservative. Mini camps, we are assuming that there's no February mini camp, since we're staffing up still. The idea would be to begin both day camp, the after-school camp and mini camps after that date, that we should be fully staffed. So March, April, we should be up and rolling at full strength. The actuals were lower for 2025 because we weren't staffed, but our actuals in past years were quite a bit more, even with reduced enrollment. So I think that number is achievable. The other part, I wrote and put about the camp income, which is really mini camps, as in the week-long school breaks, but also after school. In all this is that we have the 2 full-time staff anyway. So anything we can do in terms of having after-school program and programming during breaks, we're not adding a lot of staff in addition. You always need 2 at a minimum. But typically after school, for example, the rate is about $100 a week, and if we have 7 or 8 kids, we might fill in the gap with some high school students as staffing for a few hours a day. So there's a profit margin there, and the overhead is a guarantee. So anything we do here to reduce your overhead from a financial perspective is all good, and all things that we strive to do. The facilities rentals is everything. So that's all the parks and rec fields, all amalgamated. I think a pretty reasonable number. And then the donations, it's a little bit of an average. Sometimes we get a bit more in donations, and sometimes donors call us up and say, we're not going to donate money, but we're going to buy all your t-shirts for the camp for the summer. But so I think if it's not reflected there, it will be reflected in reduced cost. I'm hopeful we can grow that number over time. It strikes me that that's certainly achievable, that with all the kids in our programs and the value to the community, that raising a bit more than that is something we should be able to do. When I move down to salaries, some meaningful changes to discuss in line 46, which is the summer program pay. So not a decent increase from last year's budget. We went over the actual on last year, but if you look on the 146 summer program pay, we exceeded the actual compared to budget, but we also exceeded the revenue in line 36 above. So those 2 are always tied. In short, we try to cap enrollment at the number of kids we can serve, but if between the open enrollment period, which is, I shouldn't say that, that sounds like health insurance, but if between enrollment, which is traditionally town meeting day, and the start of the summer, we can secure more staff, then we open again, and we always have a wait list. So line 46 is part of why I think our summer revenues are conservative. So we're assuming an 8-week program again. The school calendar is a little different each year, so we might have a midweek start. Historically, we've run 3 separate camps, 3 different ages, and what we've learned is we really need adults with directly applicable experience related to those camps. Ideally, that's people like individual aides or teachers. Sometimes that's college students that are a little more advanced in their studies or that are in a school of study directly related. But the budget includes 3 adults overseeing each camp at $30 an hour, which is, based on our research, pretty competitive wage rate and much higher than we paid in the past, but we think that's what it takes. So camps are 45 hours a week, and those adults will get paid for that 45 hours. I shouldn't say adults, just qualified individuals. And in addition, there's a pretty generous funding, estimated $20 an hour for all the other staff, and that would be an average. So our typical wage practices, if you worked for us the entire year and did a good job, we generally pay you an extra $1 an hour. So that's a full and pretty generous allotment for planned staffing to meet the revenue, and we're going to start looking for those staff rather quickly. So a bit more than we've ever spent on camp directors per se, but we think that's value driven and going to really allow us to have good enrollment numbers. So that's a big expense, and that's the fulcrum for the rec budget. The revenues and the expenses are very directly linked, and rec is fundamentally different from the rest of the town because nowhere else do we generate revenue in this manner. So again, I think these are good and rational numbers, and we're going to work pretty hard over the coming months to try to make sure we find those appropriate camp counselors. We didn't really succeed to the extent we wanted to in prior years, but now that budget assumes there's a lot more money on a total basis, but for those lead counselors. Again, that's the critical part. When I go down a little bit further, we have smaller amounts for other rec staff and the after-school program. Other programs in minicamp is really the amalgamation of the other programs. Much of it is just filled by people working for us a few hours at a time. And those are smaller amounts and generally consistent with the history that we've had. I think pretty safe overall. A couple items I want to point out going a bit further down. Field trips, line 60. This is consistent with the last year or two, but dramatically changed. We used to hire a bus service, and we would take 4 field trips during the summer with all the campers. And after I started, I did a debrief with rec staff about the field trips. And what was relayed to me was that field trips were a huge source of stress, because it's one thing to have 50 plus kids in the pool at once. It's quite another to have them in murky Lake Champlain when you've got to do constant events. So that was part of the reasoning. Part of it is also you've got to wrangle everyone to arrive. You've got an hour bus drive somewhere. You don't have the full day by the end of it, and it's an awful lot of work. It's a break from routine, and part of it is we have the reservoir here, and perhaps going to a state park in Lake Champlain isn't that much different than simply going to our own state park. So we reduced that. One field trip seems like it's appropriate, really towards the end of the summer as a going away. But staff were just, shockingly to me, I didn't understand this world, but hugely stressed out by field trips and felt it was just not worth the strain on everyone. Going down the next line, programs is just the amalgamation of not necessarily supplies, but people we would pay to come and just deliver some fun at that program. So that could be the Dino Man, for example. And then going down a bit more in rec, there's the transfer to the capital fund, line 81. Not a huge amount. We are done with the skate park project, and there was a separate funding paid for that through the local option tax this past year. But a little bit coming into the capital fund, some more coming from local option taxes. But this is just taxpayer money, property taxes going straight into the capital fund. your total rec expenses are a little under $400,000, and that's tends to be the range that they go at. We are contributing less to capital fund the last couple of years. But that's the benefit of the local option tax.
Questions, I see Kane?
I just have a question. You made a comment to, you don't get revenue this way anywhere else. That's my question is, your conservative estimate is 200,000 in revenue from rec, but we're spending 400,000 on rec.
Right. So the net, yeah, there's a net further down.
Right.
But the point being that, if you have no recreation, do you save money on net basis? Sure. But for the summer in particular, we can only take so many children based on the staffing we're able to assure. And we try to manage that fund line each year. And this past year, once we determined we had the staffing, really early June, late May, we said, all right, we could open the spigot on enrollment a bit more, and those revenues and expenses generally balanced and managed to the net. But it's a bit unique in that sense, in that we're operating a bit more like a business here. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Because what maybe I'm getting wrong is that it looks to me like it's going to be 200,000 in the whole in recreation.
So go further down and to line 114. So that's your net impact on taxes. That's how much recreation drives you. So $378,000. So yeah, we certainly don't cover our costs on a net basis.
Mike?
Questions. One, you mentioned with the pool that it's predominantly all kids. Have they thought about doing like a night thing for adults? You know, kind of a,
Yeah, there's,
you know, I don't know the legalities even, you know, maybe having, you know, I know I'm a certified server. You know, I'm sure there are other people in town that might donate their time. That we can have like a adult program, which might be somewhat lucrative.
we've tried to be creative over the years. You know, in general, we haven't attracted a ton of people. There have been times when we've said, hey, we're not supposed to open on Sunday, but we have staff. It's supposed to be 94 degrees. Let's hit Front Porch Forum and Facebook and give it a shot, and just don't get people to show. In my mind, I think if there's a revenue opportunity, it's probably the birthday parties. And again, the challenge is staff. Staff want regular hours. They don't want to just be called on Wednesday and say, can we work Sunday for a couple of hours? So we've tried to, generally speaking, we do a lot of swim lessons on Saturday mornings, and so we'll try to piggyback on top of that. If we have staff there already and work a full day, so we have to make that work.
I'm thinking more margarita night, you know, and, you know, for the adults. Might be a good revenue producer.
Yeah, and just to give an example, what some other towns have done is they've gone to public swim hours without lifeguards.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, if you could, especially with adults, you might be able to do that, have it warned that it's gonna be without.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm quite ready to recommend that we cross that threshold. I'm not quite sure how our insurer would feel about that. But that's the direction sometimes I've gone, I think, just because of cost pressures.
Okay. Another quick area, I know there was a line item for the public works director. What is that for? Doesn't the rec department people like kind of manage everything, or is that just to equate out his salary in different places?
Yeah, that's just to allocate his expenses in some different places.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Roger had a hand up and then Amy online.
Our Did I hear you said that we were planning to reintroduce the after-school program?
I'd like to because there's a minimal expense to doing it. Most of the expense is overhead through full-time staff, and so we'd likely have to hire one part-time employee, call it $18 an hour or something like that for 2 or 3 hours. But if we can get 8 or 9 kids at $100 a week per child, there's revenue there that's more than pays for itself.
But we've tried a few different ways of attracting those after-school kids, and it hasn't been particularly successful.
Yep, it has certainly waned in recent years, as has the program at Brookside, and maybe that's just population and demographics, but it's still, I've heard from some parents who have children in our program, and there's still demand for our program, I think, and part of it is we're fundamentally different, and our focus is really on being outdoors. Not that the other program doesn't ever do that, but I think that's our primary focus. So I think there's still some demand, and it still financially makes sense.
I know we have a couple, again, hat off 2 things for me. I would just emphasize, I'm glad to hear you're interested in other staff, because I would acknowledge that we have full-time staff, and if you're a full-time staff doing your normal job and doing after school every day, that feels not sustainable. So I understand if there's a way to tag team with other staff, but I have the same question about the after-school plan. To the point of the cost of recreation, I would note that it does include our recreation director's salary, benefits, all of that, and assistant, and just note that we use those folks not just to run summer camps, but to do things like respond to what's going on in Hope Davy and the situation there, or help with community gardens. I don't know the exact extent, but just like support other recreation, manage the MOU with Capital Soccer for the ice center and then what to do when it gets flooded and you need a FEMA reimbursement. So I just want to emphasize that like the value is not just offering the summer camp or running a pool, both of which is huge, but also just want to acknowledge that I think there's really strong support for recreation director staff in our community. And so to me, that's part of the investment of this budget. Amy, I said you were next.
Yeah, no, and I know this is a budget review, but I'm just going to offer this in terms of the programs that might want to consider, perhaps reaching out to some of the soccer clubs broader than Capital, or even the basketball training programs. So having mid-season training in the summer, they may be willing to rent, and or if a Capital were to use it, they may want to get a reduction. But those are some things that we've seen in the past with our kiddos at pool-like situations.
Thanks, Amy. Other questions or comments? I don't know if there was hands that I missed while I was looking down.
Just a point of clarification, so that everybody understands that if you lock recreation off on its own, right now it's running in the red 378, 319. Right.
Mike?
One quick question. I know you mentioned that there's a cap on what we can charge out of state, right? It's more out of town residents. But do we give preference to for attendance Waterbury residents on programs, sports, filled in any time these programs that, Waterbury residents get first crack?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, but I forget the, off the top of my head, I forget the non-resident resident differential.
Not that much, I know.
No, it's I think it's either 25 or 50%. I forget which, but it ties back to the LWCF program that we use to acquire some of these facilities.
And I just want to clarify, the number Chris just gave, 378,000, is parks, pool, recreation. So just to be clear, it's not just rec, it's all of those departments.
Yeah, and Parks has, Parks is roughly a third of that. Parks is about a third of that. So if you go just above line 108, Parks is $131,000 in total.
So just to say, yes, it's the bottom line of these several sections, but there's a couple different subsections. Sandy, go ahead. Or Tom, do you want to clarify
I guess
first?
the only other important thing I want to say about the rec budget is, pricing day camp is really gut wrenching and difficult. You know, it's roughly 100 children in the past couple of years, and to a large extent, it's a captive market. There's not a lot of programs out there. So yeah, we could jack the rates up dramatically and have better, improve the margins here. But it's also a captive market of Waterbury residents, which lets you to look at it from a different perspective. And if there's no day camp program, you know, maybe other programs can pivot a bit, but there's almost no place for those kids to go, which is just a huge parenting issue. So we try to look at those rates, balance the budget, but we also try to be pretty sensitive to that issue. It's a tough conversation every year.
Would be the proposed increase to the,
I think 5%, which is a little above inflation, but trying to be mindful of the taxpayers' bottom line.
Sandy, thanks for your patience. You're next. Go ahead, Sandy.
Actually, I think my question was already answered. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm just gonna say childcare is expensive.
Kate?
I just wanted to clarify, I wasn't attacking any one part of this. But, I'm just concerned about how much we're spending versus how much. It's not about childcare rates, or anything like that. There's some substantial numbers here that concern me, but I don't think it's sure. But it leads me to greater concern over having heard brought up for bonds for rec buildings. For our,
Jane, I'm hearing every third word. I'm sorry.
I'm expressing a concern over how teetering into the red the Parks and Rec budget is as we move into further conversations about the cost of a rec building.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Tom, do you want to continue on with parks so we can get to that bottom line?
Sure. So parks, some of the 2025 actuals aren't yet reflected there because we allocate staffing, but on regular pay, we essentially allocate two public works staff and bill them to parks in the regular pay line, and we hire part-timers, so there will be adjustments for 2025, but in writing job descriptions for rec, we have two full-time people, and we are, for the second position, we're modifying that job description to include some of the parks maintenance work. Because when we look at that job outside of the really intense summer, there are hours there that we can put to productive use in maintaining the parks and facilities. And so that's really the plan for that second position. Going down further, when you go to line 95, 95 and beyond, it's pretty substantial expenses just related to the array of supplies that we have to buy for the park. So that's, you know, the grounds maintenance is an amalgamation of a lot of things, but that's everything from special play that we might buy every so often on Little League fields to new soccer goals, things like that. So it's a bit of everything. And some items we try to have a little bit budgeted for, even if there's not necessarily anything planned, because sometimes you open up everything in the spring and you need a bit more than you had thought. So that's grounds, that's field, that's tennis courts, all those things. Again, like there's a little amount there for Bill Woodruff's time. And parks is, it's tag team between recreation and public works. Celia Clark, Public Works has been in this for a long time, so she handles all the purchasing historically, and rec gets involved with some of the purchasing and all the scheduling and helping to set priorities. And the challenge we have is as soon as the snow melts, everyone wants to practice to be in the parks, but as it turns out, it's all really wet, and so we can't necessarily always allow it according to the schedule people want. Otherwise, we'll just have fields ruined. But net parks costs are pretty consistent with our history. We think we're going to have a better option going forward to have that second full-time rec position, having some direct maintenance work in parks. That gives us a little better horsepower for that position. Going down a bit further into the capital fund, if that's okay. So that $10,000 was the transfer from the operating fund. Aside from that, we put a little bit of donations, garden fees in there, but the 150 is the local option tax transfer, and that's for the pool filter. Again, that we think is a pretty high-end estimate. I work to move that down. But that's, I think, pretty critical to the pool. The challenge we have is the pool system. First of all, the filter is old to the point there's no replacement parts. You know, that being said, it's pumps and hoses, and if it breaks, the crew can likely rig it and get something working. But a modern filter system does two things. One, it's automated, and so every year I've gotten a call one day saying there's a chlorine pump at the pool, someone left it on, we can't open the pool today. You give it a day, the chlorine dissipates, you're fine. But things like that happen when there is normal. All those things would be automated. Chlorine pump runs when it needs to run. Staff would get warnings if something is wrong, and that can be on your cell phone. The other part is we've had really terrible algae issues in the shallow end, and you've probably driven by and looked at a brown pool. It was a lot better last year, and we coated the shallow end with that new with that new goop. So just by changing the surface, we were able to keep it a lot cleaner, but we simply do not get good circulation in the shallow ends. We don't have much chlorine residual there. So we're hoping the new pump and new filter system would accomplish a lot more of that, just get better circulation, better filtration overall. It's hard to imagine a lot of public use of the pool because it's oftentimes just not inviting because of the algae. So we're hoping that the new filter gets us there. I understand it's a really big number. I was shocked, quite frankly, at the quotes, and I thought it was going to be 50, maybe less, but I'm not a pool filter expert. Expenditures for the capital fund are essentially balanced with the revenues, but again, the big number is the pool. Aside from that, we generally budget relatively small amounts for some of the expected maintenance. None of it's gigantic, and oftentimes it's simply not spent if we don't need it. There is a nominal amount in there for the skate park, but I hoping we won't need to spend that. I think that project is beyond us. There's always an amount there for things like community gardens, which take some time and energy. There's always a little bit of amounts in there for things like the van. But essentially revenues match expenses there, and if the full 150 is not needed for the filter, then less would go into that fund and more would just stay with local option taxes. So that's the net of recreation. I feel like questions.
Thanks, Tom. Questions from board members? Roger, sorry.
Kane brought up the question of the field house. What is the thinking on the field house at this point?
So the rough number we have, we spent a little money this year on architects to really do some site planning and basic design for the field house. The rough design is a building in the range of 16,000 square feet. We would not need a rec building that we have now or a pool building because the pool house would exit to the pool. Rough, I believe 89 parking spaces at Dak Row, not at Dak Row, at Anderson Field. Building big enough to host town meeting day, building big enough to host all of the summer camp. The estimated price tag was 8 to 10 million, so an awful big number. And that's for essentially a metal frame building, not with a lot of accoutrements inside, a couple of classroom spaces that we could rent out and use some of them for our after school program. But essentially just a large gym space, indoor. In looking at other towns that have facilities of this size, they're generally able to operate them break even. It's not the operations, it's building the thing. The other challenge we have is those are really skeletal sketch drawings. So to advance this further, not to fully engineer it, but just to advance it further to the point where we would have better understanding and be able to go to the voters with a more accurate cost, that is still a six-figure conversation. So there's nothing in the budget for that right now. I think you need to take 2026 and figure that out. But understand that if you wanted to advance this project to the bid stage, you're talking an awful lot of money just to do that. And if the voters are not interested, you've got to make sure this is a known proposition, that there's no point in paying for architecture and engineering if you don't want the building. This is why sometimes municipal projects go to voters and then the final construction is so far over that you don't want to spend all the money in advance on the engineering, but if you don't do that, you don't have a real accurate estimate. So we're at that stage where we have the rough number, we have a rough design, and I think that design has been pretty vetted and it makes sense. If you want to go further, that's truly a conversation about not just budgets, but timelines, and what your desire is.
Would the school be interested in using that, or would they be stretched as well? Would they be a partner?
I think during the critical hours, so Saturday mornings after school, there's not a community in Vermont that has enough facilities. I liken it to the ice rink. If ice rinks were really cheap to build, every community would have one, and they'd be full every Saturday morning until noon, but the rest of the week they might be largely empty. So I think the school would have a lot of demand for the facility. I know I've heard a number of occasions that they really don't feel like their facilities are adequate in that, and so they certainly would have demand for it. And obviously there'd be an expectation that the town would charge for the use of the facility. The other part people would have to realize, if you're going to build this facility and have a model to break even operations, the only way to do that is to have user fees. Whether that's a membership fee overall, or whether that's, hey, you're going to pay pickleball for an hour and you're going to pay $10. So even once you build it, it's not free to residents.
Other questions or comments from the board? Carrie, you're in it? Yeah, come on.
With a kid who grew up here in Waterbury, I very much value the education department. We used it as much as we possibly could. And I guess like I'm just looking at it from a big global picture because I also value budgeting and I don't like to see bigs over that either. I'm wondering, we do have a recreation committee, correct? I don't ever hear much about them, or they're not here tonight talking about this budget either. So I guess my questions are, is there a way that the select board can have and ask the recreation committee to create a smaller task force and a study to look at the possibility of the very different programs that we're all talking about here tonight? They're on the committee, and maybe they're a little bit more expertise with this stuff can help define some more concise programs that might work, and also maybe create a drive to help fund this field house. I think it would be awesome to have one, and I think it would get a mass amount of use. We all know that recreation is a huge part of our committee, but I do think that, you know, if we do have a committee, that maybe they should be driving a lot of this versus it just being kind of thrown out. And maybe that would help move things forward a lot. And they could actually be looking at the budget on a regular basis. So it's not just controlled here at the select board.
Do you want to speak about, I guess Roger's been our liaison to the rec committee and provides update. I'm curious, maybe your perspective on the rec committee, having served on it for a number of years now. And I'll just name, like, I think there's also been a long and evolved history, is my understanding of the rec committee. So before we had full-time paid recreation staff, they did everything. And then we evolved to the point that we wanted to hire municipal recreation staff. I will say they've been heavily involved, I think, in this last study and planning. So really appreciate your comments and just want to note that some of that I think has been in progress in various forms. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I think most recently they've been very involved in developing the recreation chapter for the new town plan, and spent the last couple of months just honing that down and identified 17 different priorities. So I think they have been involved in that prioritization, and have done surveys on different components of outdoor and indoor recreation. So I think it is there, and certainly we would welcome them, their input here tonight, and we're not done with this, so that could certainly come in. That's what they've been up to. In terms of fundraising, I know that certain groups like the Harwood Boosters get very involved with fundraising. I haven't seen the rec committee do that, but we haven't really asked them to do that either.
And if I may, just talking about the rec facility, there's a substantial program in Vermont called VOREC, but that stands for Vermont Outdoor Rec. And so funding an indoor facility is not something, really not their bailiwick. There's a program through the Northern Borders Regional Commission that we applied for a grant earlier this year and did not get it. And that was to advance the facility study further, but you don't get a grant, you learn and hopefully write it a little differently next year, so that could be a possibility. But unfortunately, there's just no real traditional grant funding source that you can apply and reasonably hope to get this funding in the same way, to use an example of the Planning Commission, that there are grants that, municipal planning grants that they pay for studies, work done by planning commissions on a repeat basis. And so you apply, and you get awarded every 2 years, generally speaking. There's just nothing like that for this facility, unfortunately.
I just think it's worth looking into, and in regards to the upcoming town plan too, hopefully ensuring that part of one of their goals would be to look at ways to increase the revenue with various different programs, make that a priority for the coming plan for the next few years. So hopefully that's in there.
Sandy, you're online.
Just a clarity question, actually, on the local options transfer, it says that that includes the skate park and WADA, and it was my understanding that the 20,000 was allocated out of ARPA funds. Is that just thrown in there, or?
I forget offhand, it may just be in the comment, but that's all behind us.
Okay, but I did have another question as far as the $7,000 from last year that was paid to WADA, was that paid directly to them or was it paid to the contractor?
It was paid directly to WADA.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Chris?
I just wanted to refresh some of the board's memory on the community center that we had designed.
2018, it was the same final cost as the current one.
It was 14 million back then. It was a pretty elaborate building. I recall when I was in chair at the time, and I refused to sign the grant for the study of that thing because I knew it was going to be ridiculous. I got overruled on that, of course, and the study went forward and the design got done. And I remember sitting here the night of the presentation, went through all the dramatics about how nice a building it was, and it was a nice building. Then came the price. After they announced the price, I didn't have to say another word. And it just killed the whole thing. The 8 to 10 million, it sounds from your description, perhaps that it's just a hollowed out box. In a sense.
It's a big
Pretty basic, generic.
Yeah. Just to try to get the price a little bit.
And I think your concern, Kane, if I'm reading you correctly, the program that's already running almost 400,000 in the red to try to take on a building of, that expenditure. If you were trying to consider that there might be a way of consolidating costs.
My concern
bringing
is
that number down.
if we have a department running in the red and you can see it in our agenda tonight that we're going to be talking about a bond vote to then ask for another bond vote for a department that's running in the red. I have concerns. I wouldn't try and stop the project cold, but I have concerns for sure.
I know Roger talked about a in-house effort at one point through fundraising and local labor forces, perhaps. That'd be probably your best bet. if at least look into that.
And I'm going to encourage us just to say there is no funding proposed for a rec. So I want to not, well, no, and not even just you, Chris, to the board. I'm saying as our timekeeper for the evening, where it's 8:30, I have an 8:15 agenda item we haven't gotten to. And I think it's a worthwhile conversation the board needs to have around recreation and strategy, whether it's with the rec committee. We haven't actually formally received the results of that study. So that's a future agenda item. So I don't want to minimize or mitigate it. I think as it is, we've discussed, we have a proposed budget for this evening. So I'm curious if we have other questions on those components now. Otherwise, we can keep revisiting it as part of the budget, but I'd encourage us to stick there for tonight. We have other questions about recreation and parks. I will say, I think when we see it, it would be great. I don't know how we're going to do it in the town report, but if we're doing net operational costs, I just feel like it's inconsistent right now to just have one for the pool and not have one for parks. And, I would propose we could eliminate them entirely. I want to look at the past and see how we've presented them, but, just want to be consistent in the framing. And I know it's not perfect because staff work in multiple departments. Do folks have other questions on this, or do we want to, again, we're going to circle back here because we're going to look at funding petitions quickly and then go into LOT and full budget. All right. Yep, what we had at 8:15 was petitions, and this, I think, was just an FYI as we were diving into the full budget. Yeah, you had it earlier, it was an email.
Tabs here.
Are we good? Should I start talking?
Yeah.
These are just the organizational funding petitions, and Karen was kind enough to give us an update before she left, and so I guess this is just for awareness. And Tom, to your wrap up, do we have these included, penciled in yet, or
So-
no?
Partially, I included, I assumed an increase, $7,400 from the prior year without knowing the specifics, so I think we're in the range. So it's an adjustment, it's not dramatic, except common market is entirely new. And then maybe one other out there that's entirely new.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I anticipate there will be one from WADA, and as well as these. And just to say, these are funding positions, so folks have submitted them, they're gonna be on the warning for town meeting. We don't even get to have a say in it, but it's just an FYI as we're looking at our budget for the year.
And just so folks are clear, because I read this 3 times before I noticed it, we just tend to read these quick. The Legion is in fact asking for a reduction.
Down from 2,500 to 1,500?
Yeah.
Any questions on these? I'm just noting for the record that I believe the deadline is January 16th. So again, we'll have the final information before we do the final warning, but going into our presentation Saturday, this is where we're at.
And I'm on low power, so I'm gonna need to make somebody co-host before we go.
Okay,
So.
is that okay? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're the Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
And I'll give you the Zoom. I'll give you the L.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Roger, go ahead, and then Mike.
These ranges that we're getting on this, are they asking us for a recommendation, or are they going to put their final figure into their petition, and then that's what gets advertised?
Oh, hang on, we gotta. I did. Does that help?
Yep. That helps. They may not hear us, but still helps.
Please pause for a technology break. For your question, Roger, which is just informational, I think the from and to is last year's request to this year's request, so I don't think it's a range.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
We're just noting that the practice has been folks email if they've been doing it in the past, and or if they're new, submit signatures like common market. And having done what Cheryl is doing right now, it is really hard to have multiple screens, so we're just being patient for a moment.
I have a question about the increases by a lot of these organizations. Have we had a detailed narrative as to why they're increasing their budgets? And I guess I have been saying this for years. I'm getting more and more concerned about the creep of increased requests that we're getting for these special requests.
So you should be on the owl volume.
All right, so that means I have to turn my Zoom volume on. Yeah, my Zoom microphone on. Oh my God, what am I doing?
Yeah. You're gonna have to do it on the screen, because that's your Zoom window, turn the audio and video on.
Backwards, that's what it
And
is.
Tom, are you
Backwards.
screen sharing, or is this just you sharing?
This is.
Hello, how's the owl? And then we
There we
unmute
go.
the video to see our beautiful faces.
No, right.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks. We had a lovely technology break while we reviewed funding requests. Thanks, Amy. We're all back. Hi, everyone. We're not Cheryl. We're the Steel Community Room and
Hi,
a
sorry.
laptop that needed to be plugged in.
Surprise.
Okay, we're still on funding requests. Mike, you've noticed that some have been increased. I don't have the information right now about what additional information we received. And again, I'm noting if they get signatures, we actually don't have a say in the matter unless you want to make a motion on the floor at town meeting. And I don't know which of these were just a request and which of these were signatures, but we can get that before Saturday, but I don't have it right now.
It's all based upon, they get their signatures for X number of dollars. That's what it is. They don't have to explain.
Well, we've had a variety of practices. We've had folks who have been funded at a certain amount for multiple
Right.
previous
Over
years.
$1,000 for the individual, we can ask the question.
Right.
The ones that are below 1,000, to choose just a vote, and I'm less concerned, but I'm starting to be more concerned with 5,000 here and 7,500 here. It's becoming more and more of a economic creep to the municipality, and not to say that these organizations don't do good things. Most of them all do very good things, but the days of people raising money with bake sales and other raffles and fundraisers, I think they need to look at their priorities.
Thanks, Mike. All right, any other comments for this? I'm hearing that we want to get more detail on those, which we can do prior to putting together the final warning. I'm gonna bring us back to the full budget, and I believe we have some updated local option tax proposals as a place to start.
Cheryl, you can pull that up if you want.
Before we continue, can I just confirm that everyone online sees the agenda page and now the local option tax thing popping up? For screen sharing.
Probably in the chat, which is just not.
Sure.
Gonna presume.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, thank you very much. There was a lot of screen juggling I just had to do. Appreciate that.
Right, we are screen sharing. We have paper copies. Here we go.
And
I would say we reviewed this extensively on December 22nd, and so then we have some additional updates.
so the update, which is highlighted from the last meeting, I believe I missed the 22nd.
Yep.
Is the fire command vehicle at $105,000 is not funded. The tanker truck is at 110. At the time, I included the total cost of the tanker is $415,000. I included a bit more because that would be financed. It would be beyond our, likely some of this cash need would be beyond our ability to use internal resources, and so there'd be a bank loan here, and the warning would have to reflect that. So I'm assuming there's some interest there. But I think it's an overall safe number. I did confirm with the fire chief that he can certainly live with that and delay the command vehicle a year. I also confirmed that I had thought that we would need some resources for fit up, and wrote that note. And he said, no, that's the vehicle with all the everything he needs. So I think that 110 is entirely workable. This would be a 4-year financing again, so this would be, once it's approved, is there for quite some time. And everything else is left unchanged from the prior meeting. I didn't look at the select board minutes and don't believe I saw any other changes. That being said, line 32 does show an estimated end of year balance. And there were some items presented from natural disaster tonight that, there's a capital, there's the trailer, which is not a huge amount, but nonetheless, that's purchase of a trailer would be consistent with our local option tax policy. Some of the supplies, I'm less certain about, but certainly the trailer. Could be a fit there if you want to add some funding for that. The other piece to think about is that if there's a desire to establish a natural disaster reserve, which sounds like could be seed funded in year one, and then in future years, very small amounts unless it's needed, but just to adjust for inflation. In my judgment, that's consistent with the policy adopted by the board. So that would be another item to consider. Without impacting the tax rate.
You're saying using LOT funds to fund a created reserve for it to be created?
Not necessarily in every year, but as a seed funding.
Do board members have questions or comments on those proposals and the updates in the LOT? Okay.
I think moving the disaster preparedness committee's request to LOT makes sense to me, especially with the fund balance. I'm not opposed to a reserve fund. That's a good idea.
Roger?
I agree.
Mike?
I agree too.
Other questions or comments?
The other thing I think we should really think about along with disaster preparation is a 55K to raise the mechanicals. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. In this day and age with flooding and stuff like that. I assume that 55 is to raise it above two feet.
We're 2 feet above now.
Now,
Yeah.
and the 55K would bring it to there.
I forget the exact additional height. To some extent, my recollection is that
Probably another 2 feet.
it almost doesn't matter if you're gonna go 2 feet or 4 feet at that point. You're disconnecting the power supply and everything. And you know, the pillar is the tiny piece of it. The other piece that I'd add is that if we got flooding to that point, the entire basement would also be impacted. And that's what some probably I don't know if it's flood hardened, I don't believe it's flood hardened, but also the portions of the library would also be impacted. So the other expenses to fix the building, yeah, for sure.
So what would your recommendation be without that mechanical?
You know, the 3 floods we saw, the water didn't get to the level part right behind the building. It was still a little bit below, so we still had 3 or 4 feet to spare depending on the flood.
For those mechanicals to flood, the river would need like 428, right?
Yeah, 426 was our peak, so.
Yeah.
That being said, if that ever happened, be nice to be able to dry out town hall relatively quickly and have the heat run or the AC run and be able to use it as base of operations. So we still, and the other piece I'd add is this was part of the FEMA package we applied for.
Okay, that's
Now, we still have not been, now that was applied for eons ago. That being said, we still have not been formally denied. So in 6 months, when we find out that some of the projects we applied for could be funded or partially funded, it's a possibility.
Other questions or comments? I will say I'm noting that with this, I am okay with the trailer. I guess my question is how much, given the conversation out, should we just put the 8,000 in? I think creating reserve is a worthwhile step for this year, and I think there what mitigation is one of the few things there maybe is some grant money for. So before we were just to spend it out of LTA. More importantly, Tom, I'm curious your perspective on the estimated balance of 98,000. I'm just noting that this is like a variable revenue source. When we're gonna have the final numbers on the 2025, if that 392.5 is correct, and just noting that like, if we were to not get 900,000, kind of what the contingency plans and order of operations, I'm just noting like, I feel like this is a fund where we want to have some buffer and not necessarily be allocating, even if the 900 is conservative, more than.
Even if, to be roughly 10% below the estimated revenue for next year, which would mean if you're 10% below, you finish the year with a zero balance. You'd really be looking at Great Recession style numbers, because in some municipalities that collected sales taxes at that time, that was the short-term impact. It didn't last for a year, it lasted for a quarter or two. But we have seen that in our, in our economic past in the last several decades. That being said, there are always things that are not going to require cash necessarily in that year to the extent budgeted. So some of these things can be delayed if there's a short-term cash issue. So the sidewalk funding can be allocated, but if there's a big decline in LOT revenues from one quarter, you can say, 150 is there for sidewalk, but let's do 100 this year. So I think there's always some wiggle room, and that's also why I always say we should treat some of the big capital items with caution, because if you're paying for a fire truck over 4 years, you're limiting your flexibility. But I would look at this and say sidewalks are always something that could be trimmed a bit and just delayed for a future year. And then the pool number is a high-end quote. We're going to work to trim that down, but I really sincerely hope we can get that number down a bit. And then gravel roads is also a number that, again, I think it's pretty high in everyone's priority list to not reduce that. But if there's a reduction, then there are some ways to deal with that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Other board member questions? I see Amy online. We can't see Amy, then Sandy.
Sandy, go ahead, Sandy. You're ahead of me.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that actually at the end of the year, there's an additional 175,000 in there that has not been spent by the Housing Trust Fund, and that because we haven't created a reserve fund is still in the local options tax fund, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, okay. Yes, and the first 100,000 was ARPA money, so it's in general fund balance, not LOT reserve. If we're gonna get really uppity about it.
The first 100,000 was out of ARPA funds?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Don't recall.
No, that's the 24, it's the 2024 funds. But
Oh, early LT, okay,
Yeah,
fair, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, ARPA funds are all spent.
Thank you, sorry, my mistake.
That's okay, no problem.
the free money fund.
Thank you. Beyond the clarification, anything else, Sandy?
No, I just wanted to clarify that because that's actually not the ending balance at this point, so.
Okay.
Until that's changed.
Yeah, I'm treating the ending balance, Sandy, as if it's all spent, but not all of it has been.
Okay, thanks.
And Amy?
Just following up on a prior meeting where I had raised the idea of adding a column. I don't think Tom was at that meeting, but helping at least residents like me be informed with the type your characteristics that you had in your lot type for spending purposes. Adding that to a column to help make connections in terms of what's being spent and if it's in line with the thinking and decision making.
Thanks, Amy. I think we did all agree on that, and it didn't make it to the to-do list before this meeting, but we will work on it.
Thank you.
Report.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on LLT? So I'm hearing support for trailer and funding a reserve. Is there amount we're proposing funding for the reserve? I believe it was 14,000 and change was the proposal from natural disaster. We could put more in if we want to have it as a reserve.
And in my mind, a big variable, there's two big variables. The first is dehumidifiers, which we now know FEMA won't reimburse us for. The dumpsters, they will, and I think if there was a flood tomorrow, your dumpster cost could be pretty small, because we've gone through this unfortunately a number of times. I just think over time, 5 years from now, your dumpster costs would be dramatically different. So when I think of the reserve, Danny's argument was you could put in, call it whatever, $14,000 now, and maybe you go up by 1,000 a year. I fundamentally think of it a little bit differently, and that if you're going to pay for those dumpsters, it's not 1,000 a year per se, because every year you go, your costs go up a lot more. Just my take on it.
Why do we cost go up so much?
I just think people get complacent, and at some point, if it hasn't flooded in 5 years, you're gonna fill your basement too.
Dean?
I was just gonna say, in regards to your comment about FEMA reimbursement. The last few months, several states have had natural disasters and have not gotten federal disaster declarations. They've been refused their declarations. Means no FEMA. And I think we need to be pragmatic and assume if we have a flood tomorrow, we're not getting a disaster declaration. So we're not getting back, we need the money in our coffers in the event of disaster, because we're not going to be reimbursed by the federal government. My thinking.
We still have a dollar question amount, and then I'll say in terms of as we're loading with local option tax policy, if we're creating reserve fund, we probably want a policy for eligible expenditures from the reserve fund before we bring it to voters, which does not need to be a tonight problem. I'm just saying, is it dehumidifiers? Is it dumpsters? Is it damage to municipal infrastructure? Is it? I think we should create it regardless, because we have a lot of uses, but I guess that's a policy question for us on how wide, because it will be a reserve that can only be used for specific things. And if others have more details. Peter?
Yeah, just quickly, on that line of thinking, what about like culverts?
Right.
The reimbursement from all the infrastructure.
Right.
So that's.
Yeah.
I think we give it what they ask for. Start.
Yeah, so the 14,000.
And
And in your mind, is that just response or is that other impacts?
I think that goes into. I agree with Peter that there should be some focus on infrastructure for sure. And $14,000 goes a whole lot of paying for infrastructure, but. We're gonna need to. Need volunteers. We're gonna need to do a million things during a disaster, so I do agree that it's definitely. Need some time to chew.
Question.
Yeah.
How does it work? Let's just say, try to be optimistic. That all the Canadian visitors come back to Vermont. And they come into Waterbury and spend their money, at McGillicuddy's and all the other places. And stay at our hotels. And we have a lot more money in LLP funds. How flexible do we have if we have a big surge of LLP to be able to use that money?
Here's where Sandy Saban and I are gonna have a disagreement a little bit. Perhaps not. Your adopted budget is not a contract.
Right.
It's a plan. So I believe that if you've got a revenue gain that's unanticipated, I think with appropriate warning to the public, allocating some of that is not an unreasonable position for public elected representatives to do. I would caution you to say that there should be some rational guardrails related to that, at which point we do go directly to the voters. But if, in my mind, if if there's $100,000 gain compared to budget, and there's something like what's done in the past, there was a desire to pay it up, though. Very broadly supported, I think. I think it's within your legal purview without question. The real question is, what do you think is appropriate to bring to the voters and what's not?
I agree with that, sir.
Sure.
I guess that's why I was pushing to be a little more conservative on how we spend our LOT money in the first number of years here. But, I know it's a hard ask to put 200,000 in the tax equalization fund. It's exactly for all these little things that we keep talking about. We're gonna stick over here and stick over there, and, for this purpose or that purpose, and just build this fund. $1 million to $2 million in the next 5 years. That takes care of all of it.
Thanks, Chris. Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't think that we disagree completely, Tom, on that. I think that my problem might be more so that a lot of times it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse, and because we're spending more than we actually know we're going to get in revenue. But also, I just think that just because you can do something, sometimes you really have to think about it, because if it's going to cause controversy in the public, you really need to think about whether or not it's worth it if it's not urgent. It might be better off to hold off on some things if it's not an urgent need, which we all know that the flooding would be something urgent. So, but otherwise, I think we do agree on that, Tom.
Any other questions or comments from the board? So far takeaways I have include that we would like to add a trailer into the proposed local option tax expense. We would like to reaffirm our desire to have a lovely additional column corresponding to the local option tax expense category for the policy. And there also is a desire to have a warrant item to create a disaster preparedness reserve fund, and then a seed allocation from local option tax money of at least $14,000. Other thoughts, changes, comments? I would propose like $25,000. I just think if we're doing the thing and funding a reserve fund, we're gonna have the expenses, and if we're doing it one time from LOT, it's going to be available permanently for the community. So I would propose more in the reserve and less in the equipment budget. That's my 2 cents. I guess with the question that I also think we have to have a spending policy before town meeting so that we can tell people what it be used for. Yeah. All right.
And to address Pete's question, what are we budgeting for the culverts? Replacement?
So I'd have to pull it up. We always have. Let me do that if that's okay, or Cheryl.
Yeah, that's great. It's in highway.
Yep.
Okay.
So it'll be in that highway tab.
What's the next?
I can screen share. Oh no, you're it's a different spreadsheet.
Different spreadsheet. All together.
That I'm sharing.
Highway bridge culvert garden.
Yeah. Be in the highway.
Yeah,
highway tab.
Up to. Need that to go away. Can't get to my tabs.
We can drag that little bar down.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Ah, magic, magic. Okay. Which one, budget summary?
It's, you know, I think it's budget.
Yeah,
Budget.
give me a second, I might not put up on the website.
Which is an Excel file, which is not.
Give me a second, it might not be in that. That one. So. We have, on the capital side, we have $450,000 for paving. Which is not local option tax. We have. 25 for bridge improvements, 20,000 for culvert improvements. $15,000 for the public works building and $150,000 for gravel roads. Hang on a second. Sorry, wrong year, I'm getting there. I may not have it on my fingertips, unfortunately.
It's not the 15,000 in highway bridge cover culvert guardrail.
Where are you on?
I'm in your Excel file for this draft budget in the highway tab in line 53.
No, it's the capital fund, which I didn't upload. Kind of read it, but
Oh, wait, hey, you did upload it. What's that one? Oh, no. Share something.
I don't get that.
And then after we finalize this, we can date them and upload them as PDFs with the date. So everyone has a dated PDF to review and it will be phenomenal.
Directions straight.
Yeah.
Some tabs. I move everybody. Highway.
The sign, I mean, he said it's a capital, which is not a town.
Which is not a tab.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thought I made it.
You did make it, to be clear.
I did.
You have it there, just leave it there in case we do full budget review. Sorry to everyone. As I recall, at a minimum, we'd like to replace all of the culverts on Leftoville before we pay them. There you go. We have 14 culverts planned for replacement next year.
There was part of.
At a minimum. Before we pave. Do you want me to have select board member dibs section of the budgets they want to talk about on Saturday while we do this?
Sure.
Yeah, so once we finalize this and other expenses, we do, as is noted at the bottom of our agenda, have budget adjustment day, woohoo! Saturday, 9:30 a.m. at the Legion, presuming you're doing that again, where we're gonna present this. We did this last year. Last year it was Have Your Say Day. We had a select board member each take a part of the budget so that they could talk about it and give a high level overview. So we should make those assignments for who would like to do what, presuming everyone still wants to hold that event on Saturday. Not hearing any objections. The first section is general government, I believe, if we're gonna do the full budget from the spreadsheet. Anyone who would like to do general government? I'll do it. I'm happy to do general government. This does have some of the disaster stuff here and a variety of other things. Library.
You don't need to super passionate about it, was.
Library things. Health and social services is really small, so I'm not even gonna assign someone. We've just talked about parks and recreation. Does anyone want to take that? Roger? We have the highway budget. Mike's gonna do highway. We have the fire department.
Fire.
And noting that several of these obviously have overlap with local option tax. Planning and zoning.
That's your wheelhouse.
I would say I will do it if no one else would like to. Easy instead of my own name, so Alyssa for planning and zoning. Public safety, which right now is WASI, who we heard from tonight, plus the state police contract. Roger? Tom has the municipal building operating fund as its own tab. My assumption is we're just gonna cover that in other department budgets. We have cemetery. Which is like
Close. You can't say I'm closest, but.
goodness, Mike.
Age is never age.
All right, I have Mike, highway and cemetery, Kane, fire and library, me, general gov, planning and zoning, Roger, parks and rec and public safety. And then do we want to joint do LOT? Does anyone want to lead LOT? We could do subsets of LOT. There's.
Roger did such a good job on that last year.
Right.
You've been nominated, Roger. Do you accept your
Sure, I'll
nomination?
But I'll.
Corey has taken none of these.
Oh,
That's
right. Sorry. Hidden on our screen behind the budget. Tori, is there any sections of the budget you would like to present?
Yeah, I can do LOT and planning and zoning. Sorry, I texted you, but it did not work.
I'm clearly not looking at my phone. Thank you.
That's a good thing.
Okay. Roger, is that good with you?
Yeah.
I'll do general government. All right, amazing. Once we have the budget finalized and in PDF format, we can post it. And then for each of them, honestly, at this point, I mean, I'm happy to meet with Tom, or folks can meet with Tom to get a quick overview so that we have 1 to 2 PowerPoint slides of high level content for those. And then we'll obviously have full printouts to talk through with more details. Last year, we did the format of us kind of presenting up front and then having a lot of time for questions, comments, feedback. To say generally, I think that's the goal of both Saturday and Monday. So 2 opportunities, morning time, 9:30 a.m. We're having a special meeting on the 12th. It's the second Monday, so not our regular meeting, 6:30 per usual, but again, we'll do the same presentation of where we're at for the budget. This allows for additional adjustments, again, before we're warning the actual version of this that will be out for town meeting. We can also talk about other agenda items at that meeting, like if we're doing a reserve fund, what the allowable uses are and things like that.
Alyssa, Sandy put in the chat, can we post it in Excel format as well? I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, we can
Thanks.
do Excel and PDF. I just know not everyone has Excel, and so I want to make sure we have PDFs.
Right, totally understandable. Yeah, thanks.
We do fine.
Are we doing pie is Mike's question for 9:30 a.m. Saturday. We should make a determination so we can share it publicly.
No, hey, if you wanna bring pie, man, be my guest.
9:30 Saturday, BYO pie or breakfast item. I'll do a Costco run Friday for at least some to share. Do we like this? We cannot do breakfast food if everyone likes it, and everyone can just go to Casey's Bagels. There's many options.
Sorry it took so long, but there's 50K in culverts for next year.
You completed the circle. Thank you, Tom. Tom, in my whirlwind budget, we also should do capital funds, right? That I missed. We'll need to present each of the capital funds. Our folks, they all correspond to a department, unless I'm getting it wrong.
Highway, recreation and fire.
Okay, are folks okay if they're doing a department, also doing its capital fund as part of their presentation? Okay. All right, other questions, comments, budget places folks would like to review based on our discussion tonight or anything else that's been brought up? I know there was the question about Randall Meadow earlier, so before we go, the proposal is 10,000 from LOT for that.
Are you gonna talk about that? I mean, when did it change?
Yeah, we've reviewed this at, I think, the last 4 consecutive meetings. So the 325 was as proposed 12/125 before we had notification of the grant award. So upon notification of the grant award, we reduced that significantly.
So why is there still 10?
So, primarily because there's likely to be some costs that may not be covered by the grant. And sometimes that's also just due to timing. And so the thought is to have some extra funds there in the event that there's just some funds that are outside the scope of what the grant approval.
It just sits there and maybe it goes back.
Right.
It's kind of off, but how long do we have to use the grant money?
So we don't have a signed grant contract yet, but I believe it's 5 years from the date of the contract.
Right. I'm gonna go with, are we comfortable stopping the share and moving to the Randall Meadow? Do we have any other budget things we want to talk about?
Do you want to talk about the old housing trust fund line?
Oh, yes, thank you. There's an additional proposal.
So and initially put this in at $75,000. It's actually slightly different, but there's been quite a bit of conversation about the housing trust fund. There was an allocation made by the Selectboard in 2024 of $100,000. And an allocation made in 2025 by the voters of 75. As of right now, at least the Waterbury Housing Improvement Program hasn't had a lot of demand. That can change pretty quickly. But one of the thoughts are that $175,000 may not be needed. So if you wanted to, in essence, reallocate some of that towards reducing the tax rate, it's available. What I caution you at is we're, roughly 3.4%. So if you want to buy it down, you can buy it down, but next year there's always a price to pay for it. So if you're at 3.4 and go to 0, assume your 2027 budget's going to be 6 or 7 or 8%.
What do you say that?
We're gonna be hit, we face the same inflation everyone else faces. So I think, every year I think the goal is to be below the rate of inflation. It's always a little bit of a challenge. And I think, you did 0 last year. There's always a little bit of a price to pay for that. So I think just to, again, you're the select board, it's a policy decision you can make. But I caution you that if you buy it down, you've always got to buy it, you've always got to pay for it the next year. Plus you've got to pay for base increases in operations.
Or we may have a whole lot of investment money next year.
So we do like half, so we split the difference, because maybe I'm gonna be optimistic, but I see more revenues coming in through LLT. I think this was a real down. I could be wrong. So I'm subject to the taxpayers are gonna be hit by that big school tax increase. And if we can mellow that out a little bit by splitting the difference, I think that to me would be my recommendation.
75,000 will buy it down by how much?
You're at $75,000, your tax rate, your increase would be 1.73% year to year.
Give us an idea of that. Compared to a $400,000 home, that represents.
Yeah, give me just a second here.
And for folks online, we're in budget summary 1/5/26 on the.
So your tax rate right now is 55.5 cents. Go to 56.46 cents. So if your house is worth, you said 400 grand, Chris? So if your house is in our grand list worth $400,000, in 2025, you would have paid $2,220 in municipal taxes. If the rate goes up by that 1.73%, you would pay $22.58, so you have a $38 increase. If the rate, sure,
Why is Tori in the waiting room?
No,
she may have popped out.
good question. Thank you. They are to do that.
If your rate goes up the way it is right now, which would be that 3.39%, your increase would be, again, a $400,000 home would be about $75 even. The other piece, just to factor in the rate increase, is the budget assumes the grand list grows 0.7%. The average over the last decade is 1%. 0.7 is the low year. But try to be conservative there, but I'd rather have the select board be in a position at the end of June where they're setting the tax rate that they don't need to go higher than what they told the voters at town meeting day. So the last 3 years, they've been able to, 1 year, they've lowered the tax rate a tiny bit compared to town meeting day. The other 2 years, they kept the same rate, and then it was a small surplus generated, but not a lot, $3,000.
The board members have questions or comments?
I sure do. Comment the first. Who came up with this idea?
Just trying to find a way to respond to the concerns I've heard about buying down the rate.
Okay. Secondly, there are lists of other things costing us $75,000. The program hasn't even been in swing for, how long it's been, 6 months? I don't know, since we went live with it, less than 6 months?
Oh, yeah, since it's been fully signed and contracted, sure.
Yeah, less than 6 months. So we said, we'll give it a year. When we initially spoke about the housing trust and Waterbury Housing Improvement Program, we said, we'll give it a year before we kill it if it doesn't show any promise. We're less than 6 months out, and we're talking about killing it.
Not killing it, just reducing the money.
Charter does say, that's a lot of tax money's for.
It's one of the buckets, yeah.
So it wasn't his idea. It's in the chart.
And Kane was just asking where it came from, so Tom proposed it.
And I guess part of my thinking was if you reduced it, there's 175 now allocated. If you reduced it by 75 and there was demand, you can budget for more money next year to go back into the trust fund. So I'm not saying it's a good idea. I was trying to tie using it to something something other than a permanent use of the LRT, but rather in past use. Because I think if you start using the LOT every year directly as just an operating revenue, it's fundamentally then no different from property taxes in that respect. It just becomes part of your operating budget. And I think if you do that, it's harder then there's always that tax pressure. I don't think the school tax pressure is going away anytime soon. And I think increasingly then you'll find yourself in a situation where less and less is available for capital and more goes towards the tax rate, which is fine if that's your desire. But I feel like the last few years, the LOT has enabled the town to buy an awful lot of equipment and invest in things like roads and bridges without impact on the tax rate. And where if you lose that, that's something really hard to get back.
Okay, Sandy was online first and then Chris.
Just a quick note, as far as the Waterbury Housing Improvement Program, I understand where you're coming from on this, Kane. But if it's anything like VHIP program, which they are the ones that are doing all the paperwork on this, it takes almost a year for the whole process to go through anyway. So if we have any applicants, it's going to take a while and could actually go into next year's budget season anyway. So I don't think moving the money now is going to affect the current program that we have. If we get 3 applicants, which is what we're allowing, it's going to take months for the whole process to go through.
Thanks, Sandy. Chris?
Make a point there about buying it down, that to me, it doesn't make sense, okay? If there's a way of reducing some of our debt that would eliminate a portion of that increase in perpetuity, I'd rather see that done as opposed to just kicking the can on it. Because once you adopt that budget, you can buy it down for 1 year, but you've adopted that expenditure perpetuity, so it doesn't go away, so it's not really something.
And we have 185,000 of debt payoff already in the draft. Oh, no, I'm saying we already did some to the extent we can, and I don't know if there's more. Other folks have questions or comments? I don't know that this is the right strategy. I guess I appreciate the aim of we should look at it but I think it's complicated for a variety of reasons, and the 1 year buy down is hard. And I would like to have a lower proposed increase in taxes, so. Tom, I also noted while we were on that summary page that we didn't review your reappraisal plan and use of reserve from
Yep.
12-15, but this is making use of it, so I think
Yep.
we just should review that as a board. It's on 12-15. We didn't get to it at that meeting.
So
Oh, yeah, Mike.
do we want to maybe defer this decision to after the budget adjustment days? I would like to hear what the residents, of the community have to say about what's there. I think it's worthwhile having public weigh in.
And it would be reappraisal plan and use of reserve for
Thank you. Sure. Yeah, so, and just to say on that last issue, Mike's proposing that we mention it at budget adjustment day. Do other folks have questions? Or proposals like that plan?
Yeah, I'm pretty put off that we took the Waterbury Housing Improvement Program straight. Which, same price in the local option next, and we're not even funding with this year.
I'm not hearing strong support for immediately making that change, Tom, so I think we'll probably present without it and can note in general. I think we haven't had a full draft budget of all departments until tonight, so I'm noting we're getting it ready for budget adjustment and comment. We still can adjust it further and just be important about that framing, but if we want to ask specifically on Saturday, we can. This is a backtrack to an item we didn't get to on 12-15, which is around the reappraisal and the reappraisal reserve. And Tom has a proposal, so I'll turn it over to him.
So by way of background, the town gets money every year. It's a per parcel base fee that the intent is to help pay for your reappraisal. So the town wisely has reserved those funds. They haven't been in the operating budget. They've just been all budget revenue that we reserved. And so we are in the midst of the reappraisal. And so after taking a look at this, it seemed rational and reasonable to consider using the reappraisal reserve, since that's what it was for. So I did a little forecasting and talked to our lister, and we're hoping to staff up and hire the equivalent of a half-time person. That could be multiple people beginning in April if the budget is approved, and have some other expenses in there. Line 11, the contractual expenses will be for another licensed appraiser who might have some experience specific to some commercial property that are higher value, giving us some guidance there. But the general thought being that we have a staff person who was made full-time to conduct the reappraisal. We're offsetting his labor costs in part with using the reserve for him, but also using for more and new direct costs for the reappraisal. But the general thought being that you could do this and still end the year with a pretty good fund balance, and your reappraisal is going to go on in 2027. And if we have the reserve for a specific purpose and that purpose is upon us, let's use it for that purpose. So that's factored into the tax rate that's in front of you. But I think I think this one, quite frankly, is pretty easy in that you can use this, but still have pretty good balance at the end of the year to account for lingering costs that will come in 2027. And what I think comes towards the end is some big staff challenges come towards the end, because you have a reappraisal and then you have a heap of time and energy dealing with one, some of the commercial properties and getting those rights, but two, then all the inevitable grievances at the end of the process. And that's a year away, but you might want to also think about your elected listers and perhaps perhaps their role in compensation when that time comes. But the thought being, we've got a fund for this specific purpose, let's use it. And the other piece I'd say, and this is probably me overthinking it, but the state has been looking at reappraisal and talked about regionalizing it, which I actually think is good and makes sense. If they regionalize reappraisal, they certainly are not going to continue paying the town a fee to reappraise, and I worry that if there's a large reserve and there's not a reappraisal in front of the state is taken over, they might say logically, shouldn't this be ours? So I think it's wise to use it in this case, without a whole lot of question.
And Tom, is it correct? We used some last year?
Yeah, we did. That's it as part of the transition part-time to full-time.
Does the board have questions or comments on this?
Seems like a good use of the money. Spend the money.
Other questions or comments? You should go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I said, if we have it, spend the money because it's could be gone.
Other questions or comments? Sandy, go ahead.
Just a quick question, is the full-time staff, is that just for the reappraisal and is it like a contract where it goes away after that, or is it gonna be a permanent full-time staff?
He's a permanent full-time staff person.
So this will add to our budget in future years then too? Okay,
Likely in 2 years, yeah.
okay.
Other questions or comments? Right. Do we have any other budget questions or comments at this juncture? Next steps I have are incorporating the specific changes made tonight, which I think are mostly just in LOT. Getting this to a presentable form for all of us so that we can share it more comprehensively Saturday and Monday, and then discuss further if there's any other changes. Chris?
To Sadie's point on that position, that roll into a different position at some point? What's that look like?
If it's likely gone if the state if the state regionalizes reappraisal.
Also, it's only for the 2-year period.
It's a permanent full-time position now, but I think the future is in a little bit of flux depending on what the state does. I might be in a minority. I thought I was pretty pleased that the state was starting to look at regionalizing reappraisal. I do think it just makes fundamental sense for everyone. I think it's better, cheaper for the long term.
So you suggesting that they would fund everybody? Or no?
I'm suggesting that it could be that in some, it's not going to happen overnight, but in the future, what the suggestion has been that this wouldn't be a municipal function. That all your valuation would be a state function.
So not very skiing, so what's going to happen to that?
Oh, are you referring to Sandy's question?
Yeah.
So if we're using some of our reserve to pay for it, for the reappraisal and for the position, if we stop the reappraisal and we're done in 2 years, then those funds are utilized. So you're buying down the rate a little bit now, giving yourself a little bit of a challenge in 2 years, but it's not $1 million challenge, it's a $50,000 challenge.
But to Tom's leap, I think his question is that it may not be a position we would need to fund municipally at that juncture if there's other changes at the state.
Sounds like you reappraise the full take 2 years. Once that's done, wouldn't seem to be a need for that full-time position. Well, that should morph it into something else within the internal staff that's here.
I think with the growth we've had, I think it is needed as a full-time position.
Right. Any other budget questions or comments? Right, I'm gonna say let's move to the bond vote, which is also budget related but separate. And there's quite a lot of material to review. It's on to the next meeting, which is going to go. So take a minute. Okay. Great, and you're good. Tom, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So this is a set of approval documents for a bond put together by Keith Roberts of Darby, Coulter and Roberts here in town. Few pieces need to happen prior to the bond vote. Ideally tonight, the select board would need to adopt the warning, which is the first page in your packet. Then there's in addition to this, there's a specific series of warnings that have to happen to a bond vote. We've got it posted in the Times Argus in a certain series of dates. It's got to be posted several times in the same date each week. We've also got it posted in 5 places versus 3 for typical town meeting. The select board would need to adopt the warning. The select board would need to adopt the form of ballot, which is the next item. And the select board would need to adopt, sorry, let me pause there for a minute. The certificate of posting is done after the bond vote, where the clerk in essence says, this is what happened, and it passed or failed. The declaration of official intent is related to the select board being able to, the town being able to receive reimbursement if necessary prior to the bond being issued. So this says that, hey, we spent $1 million. We're not issuing the debt formally for another year. So this gives us the ability to reimburse those legally incurred expenses related to it. Operationally, we have a $2 million grant as part of an estimated $4.3 million project, and the grant can be the first payer. So we should be in a good position related to that, but a declaration of official intent is essentially a part of every bond vote package. It just gives protection. The resolution certificate is another part that would need to be adopted. And this simply states that the amount is $4.3 million for the bond, subject to the receipt of the $2 million grant we have and any future grants. So there's no obligation on the part of the town to borrow 4.3 million. We can borrow some amount less depending on any future grants we may receive. And this is essentially saying that this will all be submitted to the voters on town meeting day via Australian ballot. And I think it's a bit flowery, but fairly straightforward and part of any bond vote. So if the select board wants to move this forward, they would have to adopt these items, and then I would work and handle the publications, legal notices, all those things. There is also a public hearing requirement. And that is, I updated that on the website. I may not have updated it in a print version. We'll find the initial, but I had initially drafted that as February 16th, which is a regular select board meeting. In fact, it's Martin Luther King Day, so that would be February 17th.
February or January?
Sorry.
It's President's Day.
President's Day.
So if you had done our regular meeting in February, which is a Monday holiday.
So that would be the 17th. And I've got that, maybe not on the website, but I've got that finally updated in the packet. That was a good catch.
Questions or comments on this? I have a couple clerical changes. So in addition to making sure it's the 15th, there's a 5:30, 6:30 mix up on the last page. I think most folks in Waterbury call this the Waterbury Municipal offices, not Town Hall. And so I think we should just follow that. And I have a question why it's 4,500 in the declaration of official intent as opposed to the 4,300 everywhere else, or 4 million, 4.3 as opposed to 4.5.
It's 4 point, should be 4.3.
Okay, so it's 4.5 in multiple places in the declaration of official
I think there
intent.
were a few back and forth with fund council over the amounts, but it should be 4.3 everywhere.
Okay, or $4,300,000. And I would say we should receive and report it dated tomorrow, since no one is receiving and recording this tonight.
Yep.
Do other folks have questions, small and typographical or large and more specific? Oh, thank you. Anne, do you have your hand up? I do have to say.
You addressed what I was concerned about, the town hall business.
Thank you. And also just to be clear, this will be a Australian ballot item as part of the town meeting warning. So just to say it's voting via Australian ballot at town meeting. This is just the process to have it be legally valid for it to pass there. Do folks have questions or comments about this? Oh, thank you, Lisa and Valerie. You can see behind me, Valerie, and then Lisa. Oh, go ahead.
It's just still around that. I think in general, since this is gonna be an Australian ballot question town meeting, so it's not really gonna be something that's discussed in the meeting itself. It might be helpful, for people to hear a little bit of just discussion or just explanation of why we're bonding for the full amount when we're expecting this big chunk of money from the federal government, just how bond votes sometimes can run into big speed bumps. And I think people might be thinking, maybe we should just be bonding for the part that's the difference. And so I think being really clear about explaining that, even now for people who might be listening to this, would be helpful to understand the logic of that. Because I know there's a vision.
Yep.
And that would be helpful. And I know my other question has to be, I know you need to publish this in the Times of August, but I hope that you'll also send the notice to the brand event as well, since there'll be lots of people clicking there.
Yep.
No disrespect to our friends at the Times of August, but if I get more eyeballs. So thank you.
And just to answer that first question, every bond vote I've ever seen has similar language where you request voter authorization for the full amount, even if you have a known grant. And I think in this case, that makes really good sense. The grant we have is federal money at its core, and as Kane mentioned, there have been states, municipalities where a disaster declaration has not been approved. We don't have a signed grant contract yet. Hope to pretty soon, but there's always that possibility of the grant being called back. It's extraordinarily rare, but I think it's always a possibility. So it's customary to request approval for the full amount in the event that a worst case scenario occurs.
Do you have any questions with other board members with question or comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
We don't own Randall Mountain, do we?
You do not yet.
So you haven't done chemical studies to see if it's,
No, and
I feel like this is kind of like
so,
fast.
yep, here's why, you're right, here's why. So the grant we were awarded has funding contingencies and what they have said is that we will not have a grant contract until we have proof of full funding to complete the project as envisioned, or tell us what you can do for 2 million, which is what we have right now. And so the guidance from the select board wasn't to cut the project in half. It was to get the voter authority that would allow us to move forward with the grant. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd and fast timing. The other piece that's odd is I don't anticipate that the town will need to spend anything but the grant for quite a while, because the first step is design and engineering, which is, you know, that $325,000 that was initially local option taxes. So the grant is the first payer. So we won't need to issue this debt for 18, 24 months. But part of the requirement is that we've got to show proof that we're either going to do the project within the money they gave us or have some other proof that we have the means. And I've dug into it, and that other proof sometimes is something like a letter of commitment that just says, you know, we're a big town and we've got a substantial budget, and if we need to come up with $5,000 or $10,000, we can do it. That's pretty common in taking grants, but in this case, it's not a small project, and so the commitment's got to be.
Seems like a big burden for the taxpayer. For a project that's kind of like, we don't even. Without a purchase and sale in Stanley Lawson, it only benefits the potential buyer of Stanley Lawson, if there is one. I mean, I would think.
It also benefits everyone on Randall Street.
Sure, but it definitely would be a benefit. I would like to see if there's a contract for Stanley Lawson if we get some kind of revenue back. It's gonna make their land way more valuable. I just think it's premature. We are gonna talk about Stanley Lawson. I'll see Lawson. I mean, I just think that I would rather see a bond vote after a purchase and sale and let somebody else contribute to this and not just these taxpayers.
Has there been any?
Their major funding piece for Randall Meadow. And here's where it all gets a little bit complex. So we just discussed a bond vote and Valerie raised a really good concern. The town should not own Randall Meadow until the environmental testing is done. And that's one piece of it. Another piece is that there's another grant available through the state that we think we're a very strong candidate for, and that's related to phosphorus reduction, but we're not a strong candidate for that grant until we have a final design for the project. So the folks at Central Vermont Regional Planning that they oversee the state funds have said, sounds like a great project, but until you're fully designed, we don't want to allocate funds for it. But you might not get the phosphorus reduction claimed if your design changes and we've already allocated our funds. But we think that can be potentially in excess of $500,000, maybe up to $1 million, and that would further reduce the need to borrow. So we're poking away at every grant that's out there that we can feasibly get. It all just takes time, and as Valerie mentioned, there's always 3 or 4 moving parts and they all interlap, and we just gotta try to hit the targets as best you can and try to explain it as best you can. But yeah, it's difficult and confusing, complicated by the fact that we don't own the land yet.
With the codified in state law.
Codified into state law that the land will be transferred to the town. We don't have to accept the transfer, of course. But yeah, it's not an option for them if we want it.
Question.
Yep, one second. I'm just in the award conditions for this, because I guess, Tom, my question was timeline around, I guess I'll just note, like, we have a $2 million grant opportunity. To me, that takes this project, which was a clear community priority from 2023 before there was any talk of any other projects in the vicinity. When we saw the overhead drone shots by Gordon Miller and people said, wow, the cornfield looks like a cupcake and this is really weird. Maybe we should see about taking some sludge out of there. So I think as someone who's done immediate first response through 2 rounds of flooding, it seems like a project that we have engineering for, to say that might have a 1 foot reduction in base flood elevation in our downtown is a transformational project for the downtown of this community. And to receive nearly half the total project costs, to me, is the case I'll make to voters to say why we should bond for this. Will I wish for a different timeline or more surety? Of course, but to me, the opportunity to access that amount of funding is crucial. And so my question is, I both have a contingency wanting the bond to pass, and if it doesn't, I still think we have to do the project because I think it's crucial and important, and I think it will be a lot harder if we don't have $2 million of federal funding to help support it. So that's speaking to my personal rationale behind this.
So I'm not against the bond necessarily. I think the timing is kind of quick.
Right, so the award letter says we need a commitment of other resources to include $2,292 by March 16th, 2026 to secure the CDBG DR award from the 2023 flooding and the congressional. This also was a competitive statewide process. We did allocate money to grant writers to help secure this. So it's the terms we've received. And to me, taking advantage of it to be able to move it forward is worthwhile.
Chemical studies.
That's all part of the grant.
Yeah. And to be clear, we should do a better job. Again, we have to pitch not only this room, we have to pitch the entire community on this. And it's a big ask and people are going to go vote on it. So certainly it's our job to make a compelling case for the reason why. Chris, you have a question?
So hypothetically, if we only end up with the 2 million for this project, you're suggesting that the town should bond for the rest of it. We would be prepared to give that amortization and those figures on, you know, how that will impact the residents, taxes as well. In any type of speculative idea on possible maintenance moving forward, because we talk about the fact that if that field floods, there's going to be cleanup that'll have to be done. Expensive. That, I don't know if we could be reimbursed for or beyond us or wrong.
Sandy?
I just wanted to, on the bond vote, if it is passed, if we don't use it or if we don't use it all, then it doesn't cost us anything. So, or I don't know what there's no amount if you don't start drawing from it, correct? Or is there
there's no obligation to issue the debt.
Right, so, right, it just allows us to prove that we have the capability to come up with this money should we need it. So even if the bond, so I think that should be made clear that people understand that if we do pass it, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to use it all. We may not use any of it, you know, so I think that should be made clear because it might help.
Other questions or comments from the board? So if we want to proceed with this on the timing, it looks like there's a number of things to be approved. Again, I think it would be worthwhile to have separate motions for each and to specify all of the typographical changes on each one, because I should also say, I showed this bond package to Carol Dawsbury, so we just passed 2 bond votes. And she said it all seemed reasonable from the, cursory glance. What was I gonna say? Oh, but this is all part of the documentation that then has to be packaged up and be approved. So I just want to make sure that this is a time we are being clean, clear, and explicit in motions if we are making them.
Just want to make one final comment in regards to bond vote, whereas Sandy illustrated perfectly, if we don't use the whole thing, we're doing it there. Doesn't cost us anything. The other thing I think everyone who is questioning the bond vote should keep in mind is every time we flood, we have to abate taxes on house after house after house after house. How expensive is that to you compared to this potential bond vote, where we may not have to abate house after house after house with a foot lower of flood waters? So with that, I move. Am I authorizing? Is that what I'm doing?
Hold on, we got a whole package.
Yeah. I know, I was just gonna go to the first page. Okay, the morning would be the first page. The morning is the first page. Yes.
With the change that informational meeting will be Tuesday, the 17th. Remember, right?
All right.
And municipal office.
Right. All right. See, I can't, I don't butcher this.
And reported on January 6th, this one was raised. It said we paid $6,000 for this.
Okay. I move. Select board adopt the warning for just the warning for the bond totaling $4.3 million with the changes in the language that change town hall's municipal office. Change January 5th, January 6th. And then February 16th to February 17th. Does that work? That go true?
Received and recorded January 6th.
Yeah, received and recorded January 6th. So, thank you.
Motion by Kane, second by Roger. Is there any further discussion on adopting the warning? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'm noting for the record that Tori is no longer present at that meeting, so that vote passed 4-0. Okay. Do we want a motion on the certificate of posting after the fact, Tom? Was there any? So we would need the declaration of official intent to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of indebtedness. And this also, I believe this is the one with dollar in it, I think.
4.3.
In section 3, the 4,300,000.
That's just the third whereas. Yep.
What is it?
The third.
Oh, yes.
You just put it in your motion and change all 4.5s to 4.3s.
Is someone making a motion? I'm sorry, Joe. To adopt the declaration of official intent.
I move to adopt the declaration of official intent to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of indebtedness. Change all 4.5 million to 4.3 million throughout the document.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Last, we have a resolution certificate.
Post.
This is the one where the second month of the month. Monday to Tuesday. Specifying 6:30. In the town hall municipal building.
Leave that for the 6th there.
Yep.
I move to adopt the resolution certificate, with the following changes, to the next last section. The project on Tuesday, February 17th. Commencing at 6:30. And the municipal offices in the town of Waterbury. And dated January 6th.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
And then the final piece of advice was the council recommended adopting the form of ballot.
We're going to adopt the certificate of posting.
The certificate of posting, I believe, is done by the clerk. That's the clerk's certification that all this was appropriately adopted, posted, processed, all those things.
So we're adopting the ballot.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the official ballot as recommended by the bond council for the Randolph Meadows project.
Is there a second? Motion by Mike, second by Kane. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Tom and I will work on posting those, and if folks can come in and sign tomorrow and make sure that we didn't get anything wrong and don't have to do it again. That brings us to municipal manager and board member updates. Do any board members have updates? Mike?
No updates from me.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just said you, Roger. No, wait, I'm doing.
250th committee will be meeting on Wednesday.
And I don't.
Thursday. Oh, Thursday.
I don't know how many updates that were not already reviewed. Tom, any updates we haven't mentioned?
Just that, a reminder, I'm out Thursday, Friday, and likely not able to make it Saturday. Conversation, presentation and stuff.
Thanks, Tom.
Maybe the Zoom in.
Yes, and we will try and do it both a Zoom and Orca for that, so that they can. Okay. All right, agenda items for the next meeting, which is the budget adjustment day. Final determination, bring your own breakfast, thumbs up.
I'll certainly be bringing my own breakfast.
Great. Okay.
So we're just not bringing the show.
I don't care. We have to make a determination as a board so we can share it publicly. I am open to whatever the board would like to do.
You want breakfast? I'll bring. I'll bring a quiche with breakfast.
Maybe the select board can just bring whatever they want to share, but we won't ask others to do so. It's at the Legion. Okay, see you all there. For Monday, we have follow-up and debrief from both of those. And also we should talk about the reserve fund policy if we want to do that. Other things folks would like to review, and maybe begin starting the bond informational campaign, if you will.
The appointments for the town meeting study committee.
Thanks. Any other items folks have? And I think that's it. I think we just have executive session for personnel and then we're done.
I moved to find premature public knowledge of personnel matters based on Waterbury.
All those in motion by Kane, second by Roger. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, any abstention? That's